All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. David Patrick Harry, and I am joined by my friend, as I said in the chat, one of my favorite people to talk to, the always erudite scholar, Jose Miguel. How are you, brother?
Doing well. Just been enjoying the springs out here this not so hot summer in Texas, surprisingly.
Really? I've been hearing people bitch about Texas on social media for the last few weeks.
Maybe they're in the east. I don't know. My area has still been, this is the coolest. We had the coolest June that I've ever experienced in my life. And right now is the coolest beginning of July I've ever experienced in my life. And it's going to be the coolest July July 4th that this town has had that I know of at least since 2000.
Wow.
So, I'm not complaining.
Interesting. We got tons of heat up here in the Midwest, but it's mostly humidity. So it's not like Texas heat.
True.
But
except
we're getting ready to get rained on for like the next week. But it's good to see you, man. As I said, I love chatting with you. I love catching up. I have your link for anybody who doesn't know. Jose writes an incredible Substack. He has multiple articles. His link is in the video description if anybody wants to follow it. And I'm going to be shilling Jose's Substack throughout today's stream. But what we got today is really this one. It's an open debate panel. So if there's any Protestants out there watching that want to argue their point, feel free, because the topic for today's stream is Protestantism and Protestants cannot save America. Now, as you guys know, everyone in the chat, everybody's talking about, David Wood, the recent going back and forth with Andrew, accusing everybody that's Orthodox to be KGB agents. Which is just hilarious in and of itself. And I know our favorite Orthodox internet drama sleuth, Cleve, has been exposing God logic. But these particular instances, I don't want anybody to miss the larger and bigger picture of what's actually going on here. And that's kind of what at least Jose and I's conversation will be. And then if anybody wants to argue with us or debate their point, they're more than welcome. The link is in the video description. Is that Protestantism has already failed. Protestantism is going to continue to fail. The only places in which Protestantism, and really it's Pentecostalism and forms of evangelical Christianity, is in the global South. So Africa and South America, they're seeing an increase. But it's also mixed with some shamanic, some traditional folk religion. It's not, your mainline Lutheranism from Germany or Sweden or something like that. It's something very different. And then when you look at historical Protestant nations, they're all in decline. And I don't mean like the nations themselves are falling apart, although that can be the case in multiple examples. I mean, literally, I did a demographic research before today's stream. Every single nation that was once historically Protestant is a fraction of church attendees as it once. So whether you look at England, and whoa, that's high church Protestantism, that's Anglicanism. They are at a historic low in church attendance. Meanwhile, Islam is growing. They're having all these migrant crimes. You look at Scotland, a historical Presbyterian nation. It is in its historical low of church attendees, and it's considered to be one of Europe's most secular countries. You look at Sweden, as I said, with Lutheranism. It is I think they have the largest percentage of a country that claims to be atheist. So Germany, the birthplace of the Reformation, similar pattern. They do have some Catholic strongholds. I know my wife, being a Volga German, which isn't the typical German, they were still pretty intact, but again, it's a sort of non-denominational Protestant faith. But the same pattern goes for Norway, Denmark, all these countries. have basically lost any Christian basis to their civilization. And in fact, in many instances, Islam is coming in and buying up old churches. So Protestantism, and what we're seeing with David Wood or God Logic or Gavin Ortland or whatever, pick your Protestant, these female pastors, then you got the Joel Webbins of the world, that's the right-wing Protestant. What is the common denominator is that they really don't know what to do, because the institution, the ideology is what I'll call it, of Protestantism itself, has been the greatest catalyst for its own destruction. So Protestantism cannot stop secularism. In fact, Protestantism, one of the things that we all mock it and laugh about, is it has to appeal to evangelicals and liberal progressive ideology to even get people in the door, which then dilutes the traditional Protestantism that they say they're trying to defend. So we're going to be talking a little bit about how Protestantism has failed. It is failed. And that's why I always say it's already dead. As Orthodox Christians, we've already won the fight. Of course, it's fun to look at all these instances. And, David Wood, did you see the David Wood back and forth with Andrew?
Saw a little bit. It was mainly what I found most entertaining is because I've routinely encountered, even in my circles, like, way back in the day, people trying to figure out and understand, what is it that drives Putin. And it amazes me how even people like, okay, so like I had professors who were members of the Council on Foreign Relations, and they would, assume things about him. And I've just, me as a dumb 20-year-old would be like, hey, why don't you just read a transcript of his speeches, look at who he's citing, and you can see who actually is forming his mind. Like, it's not that hard to do. And
Right.
yet people are so lazy. They don't even do that, even though that's their job. So that's, anyway.
I mean, that presentation by David Wood was hilariously poor. I mean, one, accusing all of us of being, somehow affiliated or influenced by Russia. I mean, that it's just laughable. And then even Andrew asking him, like, what are some examples? He had nothing. He had some article that was written by some guy who was formerly Orthodox, who was kind of butthurt about, a falling out. Mm-hmm. And he didn't even accuse Jay of being tied with Russia. But to me, when I watched it, I wasn't so engrossed in, wow, David Wood's actually an idiot, which was apparent. He, for someone with a PhD in philosophy, I thought that was a impressively poor showing, especially to make an argument that you just presented on YouTube in a video and,
mm-hmm.
Claiming, coloring all of American converts to Orthodoxy is somehow influenced by, again, and his whole argument was that we're fracturing America, right? That somehow we're causing a schism within America. Well, the problem is Protestantism already caused that. I mean, Protestantism itself, with the multiplicity of denominations, I grew up Methodist, and even my parents are still Methodist, but they left the United Methodist Church for the Global Methodist Church because of LGBTQ issues, homosexuality, gay marriage, female pastors, all that different stuff. So even within mainline denominations, they've already fractured. And so it's just the irony of these people not being able to see the product, the fruit of Protestantism.
Mm-hmm. It's the fruit of Protestantism and also the American system, like the political system that was established or beginning to be established in 1776. I did write an article on it, but people refer to like the 1790 and 1991 immigration acts, the white immigration acts, that essentially, from the modern perspective, restrict immigration to white people or white men of good character. In reality, both of those acts actually expanded the immigration pool, and that was something that was listed in the Declaration of Independence itself. Like in the seventh grievance that the founding fathers had towards King George was that he was preventing them from mass importing Germans into the United States. And if one wants to look into the history of that in more detail, one quickly finds out King George was concerned that mass German immigration to the 13 colonies would threaten the Anglo-Saxon nature of the colonies. So many of the founding fathers, like John Hancock, they wanted cheap labor, which is the same pattern that's happening today. And that's the thing. It was not Vladimir Putin who forced the U.S. to adopt open borders. It was not Vladimir Putin was not the reason why the United States in the year 1900 was 38% founding stock. It was already minority founding stock 125 years ago, which is, half. What, the country's turning 250, so literally halfway through its time as an empire, it was already minority founding stock. So it's not, it's not Vladimir Putin's fault that the heritage American population is now a mere like 22% of the entire American population.
Right.
Nor did he kick off the first and second Great Awakenings, which shattered the original traditional forms of American Protestantism that existed in the 13 colonies. Because it's out of the first and second Great Awakening, like second Great Awakening in particular, like that's where you get, Seventh-day Adventists, Mormons,
exactly,
all Jehovah's Witnesses, like all these breakaway groups. And the second Great Awakening laid down. I grew up in a Restorationist Pentecostal sect, and even there, like my father, who's a minister, he'll even tell you the second Great Awakening laid down the foundations for Azusa Street. And the massive growth in Protestantism worldwide has been the Pentecostal system, which it's having been in the developing world, having studied some of shamanism, mainly is because like I see people doing it and in the Andes, and I was trying to figure it out and realize and seeing all the parallels between shamanism and Pentecostalism. I came to the conclusion when I was when I was in my early 20s. I was like, there actually isn't that much of a difference between the two. Pentecostalism is essentially a function of a syncretism of old school shamanistic beliefs, and amazingly, even incorporating stuff that is practiced in Hinduism into the actual religious practice.
Right. Well, and to give Pentecostalism its fair due, it's an overreaction to the absence of participation in Protestantism, because unlike Orthodoxy, there is no participation. They've supplanted participation in true communion and mysticism with God with essentially a rational belief system.
Yep.
And once you supplant participation with ideology or rational belief, something else must fill that void. And I think within the American context, it's politics, it's concerts, it's worship music. And for the Pentecostals, it's getting into ecstatic states. They have some type of mystical encounter, some type of experiential reality that's revealed to them in some sort. So I can see why Pentecostalism just as a historical phenomenon occurs, and why it's so useful and easy to syncretize with traditional folk religion and shamanism and all that. And that's why you see like sub-Saharan Africa, West Africa, you're seeing massive explosions of Pentecostals, but it's also mixed with literal witchcraft.
Yep. Yep. No, it is sad, but it's also inevitable. I mean, even in terms of like talking about like in what sense has Protestantism failed? So like right now, the obvious disease that even your typical Baptist will see, or even Reformed Baptist will see, is SJWism, wokeism, the progressivism, etc. The thing is, the heart of liberalism, the heart of progressivism, the heart of wokeism, it's nominalism. The idea that I can declare I'm a woman, therefore I'm a woman. That philosophies, But the problem is, every philosophy has consequences. Nominalism was coined, by William of Ockham, 700 years ago, or almost 700 years ago. And that was the philosophy that John Calvin was raised in. And he used nominalism as essentially the foundation for his systematic theology system that he built.
Right.
So his idea of, predestination, divine sovereignty is rooted in William of Ockham's view of absolute potential, absolute power, or omnipotence. And that view that Ockham had came out of nominalism. So
right.
So unfortunately, the fact is, you look even in the United States. I wrote an article on it like 2 days ago. But yeah, like in terms of history, but there's a reason why like New England and the West Coast are so dominated, the strongest points for progressivism and for SJWism in general, and it's because the fundamental foundation of SJWism is nominalism, just as the fundamental foundation of Calvinism is also nominalism. They just disagree in terms of what they're naming as to be the case.
Right.
Yeah. So
fair point.
Exactly, but it is fundamentally the same system.
Right.
And same systemic foundations, I should say, same systemic foundations. And so the problem is that New England was in the third time of the 13 colonies, New England was the stronghold of Calvinism. That's what the Puritans' bread and butter was. That's what Jonathan Edwards was, etc. And out of that, is, you know, what do you call it? So their descendants today are the most liberal, for lack of a better term, liberal and woke. And then you look at the West Coast. So when Mexico essentially declared independence from Spain, so the thing is, Kingdom of Mexico was much smaller than what we consider Mexico today. Like they effectively annexed the Yucatan, which was its own. The Mayan peoples there had their own kingdoms that were essentially autonomous underneath the Spanish crown. So the Republic of Mexico, established in Mexico City, conquered and annexed them. They conquered and annexed what's now northern Mexico, and they attempted to control Texas, New Mexico, and California. In the case of New Mexico, the New Mexicans actually killed the people Mexico City installed, and essentially ignored them for the time that they were part of Mexico, which is why New Mexico was never part of Mexico. It never was. Like New Mexico was independent of Mexico before Mexico was independent of Spain. Texas was the same deal. They never controlled Texas. And Texas also was its own kingdom. It actually had its own treaty with the Comanche, for example, that was independent of the relationship of the Comanche with the Mexicans. The same thing with New Mexico. And in the case of California, when California was controlled by Mexico, California underwent what was called the Boston period, where essentially it was dominated by Yankee merchants who set up and laid down the foundations for the institutions for what would become California, as well as Oregon and Washington, which is why, even though California was settled, when the Americans came in mass to settle, even though the working classes and the farmers and the miners who came were mainly from the upper South and the Midwest German people. So you had this Anglo-Germanic, mix essentially. The ruling class was entirely Yankee, and down the line you have Jewish admixture getting mixed in. But it was very, very Yankee. And that's why the state of California, like you look at the population, their voting patterns, they vote against giving illegal immigrants, they vote against sanctuary cities. They vote against amnesty. They vote against the handouts that were given to illegal immigrants. They voted against gay marriage. And yet the Yankee elite, or even though they haven't been in New England for like 180 years now, but the elite that rule and run California just ram through all of this liberal Enlightenment SJW nonsense over these people. And it is rooted in the fact that, their ancestors, the heresies that their ancestors embraced, they still hold to those same heresies. They just, they go farther with said heresy. Essentially woke, progressivism as we know it now, the clown world as it is the end state of the heresy of nominalism of William of Ockham. And that's why the parts of this country where you have the most resistance, that are the least woke, it's the places that were not so heavily influenced by Calvinism.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's why, again, I think we're seeing this outrage by these Protestant apologists and these content creators, is because, one, they're losing the cultural battle. We all have seen this mass influx of Protestants into the Orthodox Church, and their criticisms against us really aren't that strong. For example, we got a guy in the chat here saying, slow orthos, Russia isn't saving anyone. I mean, how dumb. They think to be Orthodox means that you're pro-Russian. I mean, they have no understanding of jurisdictions and dioceses and the complexities of orthodoxy in any way, and yet they want to speak out again. It's really hilarious because it's like Israel. How Israel can't stop from what it's doing, even though its public image is tarnished. Nobody wants to support it, and yet they just still full force ahead. And you're like, gosh, can't they just, take a break in southern Lebanon? Let the Lebanese have that territory. They can't. And it's like the Protestants can't stop humiliating themselves, even their top apologists when it comes to orthodoxy. It's rather astonishing. It's eye-opening. It's funny. And it's also sad. It's sad to see what's happened to every Protestant nation. It's sad to see, to your point about nominalism, and, obviously we've mentioned this before, but sola scriptura, the idea that everyone, essentially that Protestantism replaced apostolic authority, ecclesiological authority with personal judgment, and that you're able to come to these ultimate conclusions. You just have to have your Bible, whatever, Pastor Bob says, and his Baptist church, which has no hierarchy. Well, that's the truth. And it leads to this relativism. And you look at the relativism within Protestantism, within the denominations, within the tradition itself. And then people say, oh, well, the bad part is the SJ Warrior progressive part of Protestantism. Well, that is literally Protestantism. It is a continual progressive force. It is a revolutionary ideology. It's constantly reforming itself. The problem is it's never going to reform itself back towards tradition because it debased tradition from the get-go.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was an acquaintance who wrote a piece which was on. I got a response to it coming out later this month, but he wrote a piece a year ago, and it's about how, like, he's raising his family in like a traditional Catholic group. I forget which one it is. If it was SSPV or something like that. But yeah, he was talking about how like a lot of the people in his circles, a lot of their kids apostatize. And it's not just him. He's seen this with his like traditional Lutheran friends, like Missouri, Lutheran Missouri Synod and others. And it's an element of, I mean, in the case of like, well, one, if you see the young people abandoning what you think is traditional, you have to ask yourself how durable, how true is that tradition? Because, technically, I mean, if you want to get into like actual praxis, like practical definitions, tradition is that which survives through time. So
right.
If a thing cannot survive through time, then is it really a tradition that's going to exist? And the second part is, that's the other part. I mean, if you specifically join a tradition, which is rejecting what your fathers held to, then whatever you hold to, your children are not going to value.
Right. Well, and Patrick, Patrick 7702 through and 10 said, can't wait to see how wrong I have been for 30 years. From what it sounds like in the chat that he is Protestant. Well, you're more than welcome to come on, Patrick, if you want to argue your point, because just because you've been doing something for 30 years, it's a logical fallacy that somehow that equates to it being true. You can do a lot of things wrong for 30 years. So if you have contention with anything that we're saying and you want to defend your Protestant faith or how Protestantism can save America or save the West, please, the link is in the video description. Feel free to join us. In fact, here, let me put it in the chat. So you have no excuse, Patrick. You're more than welcome to come on here. We'll be friendly. We'll be cordial. We'll be respectful. But come on, man. I mean, see the historical pattern here. Step away a little bit. You're maybe, again, even with the David Wood and some of that stuff, I think even some of the Orthodox are so close to it, they don't even see the bigger picture here, that it's over. The writing is on the wall for them. Mm-hmm. And the Bombasticus throws in 20. Thank you very much. He says, something that has to be acknowledged is that Protestants, when done right, are geniuses analyzing scriptures. Well, part of the scripture, they don't even have the full canon. But I will give credit where credit is due. There's many great Protestants that I know that have incredible recall of scripture. I will give them that. Absolutely. I won't take that away from them. Most of the best biblical and prophetic analysis I've seen are made by Protestants, mostly non-denominational.
I'd be at the opposite case. Even me, I was raised in a non-denom sect, and most of the analysis I've seen has been utterly retarded. Yeah, but that's because a lot of it is wholly divorced from the culture and the history in which those scriptures were written. That's the thing. Like, what do you call it? There's a distinction between, and this gets down to it. What you're describing and what you see even in non-denominationalism, even with the more like Pentecostal ones, where there's more emphasis on the emotion and on experience. It's still fundamentally a faith of the mind. It's not a faith that's actually lived. And it's not one that's lived in community.
Absolutely. Well, that was one of my critiques that I wrote down, is that it's a mental process. I've said this so many times that I consider Protestantism an ideology, in the true sense of religion, as a religious studies scholar. Obviously Protestantism is quote unquote a religion. It is a branch of Christianity. But when you compare Protestantism to really the rest of the world religions, we may not disagree with them, but they have much more of a sacramental, mystical element to them than anything Protestantism has. It's very much a rational Western ideology. And one of the points I wanted to make is that Protestantism, why are we seeing the barrenness of its fruits right now at the end of the 20th century and then throughout so far in the 21st century, is because Protestantism depends on an inheritance, a cultural inheritance that it itself cannot protect or produce. And what I mean by that is the homogeneity of, Sweden 300, 400 years ago, or the homogeneity of America 250 years ago. We're getting ready to celebrate the 250th birthday of America this Saturday. Well, Protestantism, because of its continual splitting, itself is a fracturing process that then creates different subcultures, different variations, which leads to the splitting of the sacred canopy. The sacred canopy, sociological idea of Peter Berger, of that which unites a nation or any tribe or any group of people. There is no sacred canopy in America anymore. And Protestantism has to be blamed for that. And Protestantism, because of lack of mysticism, is why so many founding fathers were Masonic, because Masonry provides something that is a little bit more mystical, a little bit more mysterious, a larger vision than what often Protestantism can provide.
One thing I was going to say too is, I know it's we're addressing more so the Protestant side because America's a historical Protestant nation, but even in the parts of America that were historically Catholic, like South Texas, for example. I know someone had mentioned that they've had very cool weather in South Texas as well. The fact is, it's the entirety of the West that's in just free fall, and spiritually speaking. Like a good friend of mine from here, he was in Spain on a pilgrimage doing the Camino because he's Catholic and he's having a crisis of faith. Which ironically, I told him I've been praying that he'd have one for a while, but
I hope he's not SSPX.
No, he's not. He's not,
because they just got excommunicated.
Yeah,
did you see that?
I did see that. But anyway, he what do you call it? He was going, so he's going through Spain on the Camino, the same path that Santiago walked nearly 2,000 years ago, and as he said, he was just shocked at how Spain is dying everywhere, like all throughout the countryside, and it's true. Like the countryside has been emptying out like crazy. Since Vatican II, since the death of Franco, Spain has been in just sure, they can win a World Cup game like they did today, but Spain is dying, and it's same thing.
It's funny you bring them up as an example because when I was looking at some of the demographic stuff, I was comparing with Catholic nations in Europe, and what surprised me was Spain was the Catholic nation with the highest percentage of people who grew up Catholic who no longer attend church. I was surprised by the number because it was comparable with Protestant. It was comparable with the Protestant decline in England over the last, I think the study began in 1991 that I was looking at. So from 1991 to I think it was 2021, they were analyzing these European nations, and generally the trend was the Orthodox didn't see much of a decline. There may have been a little bit. The Catholic nations, it depended which country, how dramatic their loss was. But Spain was the top Catholic nation with the highest level of people that grew up Catholic that don't attend church anymore. Yep.
And it's because that's the thing. It's not just so you have the various Protestant groups that are essentially carrying out their achieving their philosophical end, and like anything that's not built on the rock, that the end is death. The same as with Romanism, with papalism. The Spanish Catholicism that existed during the time of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, that doesn't exist anymore. Even in terms of like how the Spanish church functioned, like it had a level of autonomy that some people would even recognize as autocephaly. The Patronato Real, if you for a Catholic in Spain or in what was Mexico or Texas or Argentina, 300 years ago. What the Pope said or didn't matter. I mean, what happened was what the Synod in Toledo decided. That was, and what do you call it? The Synod, the whole issue with the SSPX thing, like right now, SSPX, getting excommunicated because they want to appoint their own bishops. Well, for the entire history of the Spanish Empire, the Pope could not appoint a single bishop in the entire Spanish Empire. He could not even nominate anyone to be a bishop. It was the Synod. Yes, it was the Synod who completely controlled themselves, who completely selected their own candidates. Here's the fun part. The Pope could not enforce a single encyclical, a single decree. They couldn't even enforce a council. Like not even the Council of Trent held weight in the Spanish Empire until the Synod of Toledo had their own council, reviewed the Council of Trent line by line, and approved it. Then it was binding for the Spanish Church. This is why the Vatican I could not happen until the Spanish Empire collapsed. So your typical history book will say, well, and it's true, officially, the Vatican opposed the revolutionaries during the Masonic revolutions and bloodbaths, frankly, which was effectively a civil war at the end of the Spanish Empire. But the fact is, while the popes officially said, no, you almost submit to the king and you have to stop doing the whole revolutionary Masonic nonsense, the two biggest gainers from the collapse of the Spanish Empire was Great Britain, of course, and the Vatican. Because this is the other part. The Vatican, prior to the collapse of the Spanish Empire, could not even collect Peter's pence. They didn't have access to any of the money and the wealth of the churches that Spain had built up around the world. And that's, so that's why I'm planning on doing, that's actually one of my goals, lifelong goals, is to write a full book on that. But essentially it's the popes who on one hand said, no, you have to honor the king, as the Apostle Peter said. On the other hand, we're benefiting immensely from the Masonic revolutions. And unfortunately, it's, this is about taking about a larger view of history. I know some people were talking about Ukraine. The fact is, you cannot understand the Ukraine conflict that's happening now without at least going back to the Council of Brest 400 years ago. And it's the same thing with the Spanish Empire. You cannot understand why, whether Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, why they are the way they are, or why the Spanish Empire collapsed the way it did, or why Spain is dying the way it is now, without going back to, how Spain actually functioned in its own, for lack of a better term, Hispanosphere, with the Patronato Real. Also with how the Fifth Lateran Council impacted the economics of the Spanish Empire when the Pope essentially flipped on usury. Usury was declared to no longer be a mortal sin, which essentially laid down on the economic side, the inevitable economic collapse of the Spanish Empire. And then going back further to the Council of 1080 of Burgos, which essentially redirected Spain towards where it is now. It's what do you call it? This is the point of what do you call it? A lot of people focus on the 2 weeks, the 2 week news cycle. But if you really want to have understanding, you really got to have you have to pick an area or a group. You really got to go deep in terms of how do these people actually live? How do they actually practice their faith? How do things actually function? You can look at, it's good to study, like the theology disputes, etc., like they would have at the University of Salamanca, for example, in the case of Spain, or, Duns Scotus versus Thomas Aquinas. But the other picture that tends to get missing, especially among theology nerds, is how did people actually practice their faith, in the village life? Most people were peasants. How did they actually do it? And if you look at, village life, you look at how they lived then, you look at how people live today, there's a complete and total disconnect. And that's that's another part why, village life in Spain is dying. Village life in Colombia is dying. Village life in Mexico is dying. And you can see the same thing in the United States. The Amish still have their barn raises. But here's the thing, the Methodists used to also do barn raises. So did the Baptists. Right. Do they do them now? No, they get mortgages to build their places. Before, before the whole community of your church would come together, whether you're Methodist or Baptist or Episcopalian, you'd come together and you'd actually build a house for the newly married couple. That was the norm for Anglo-America, for German America, the Pennsylvania Dutch who still do it, the Amish. That was normal. That was not abnormal. Everything that people look at now when they look at the Amish are like, oh, that's really cool. I wish I had something like that. Your ancestors had that 200 years ago, and it's been lost.
Well, and it gets to a consumerist point that I want to bring up regarding Protestantism. Patrick responded, and sorry, I must have took your comments wrong, Patrick. He said, I don't know if I'm the best to argue for Prots, on the verge of going Orthodox already. Well, glory to God, Patrick. I saw your comments in the chat, and I saw Crispy tell you should hop on and state your points or your arguments. So I assumed you were already Protestant. But if you're already Ortho curious, well, then you're in the right place, because we're going to make, and we are making, the definitive case that Protestantism can't save and stop anything. So I'm going to get to a point on consumerism in just a second. Anthony Ferrante throws in 10, says Protestants have scholars because that's all they can offer. Orthodoxy has saints and sacraments. And I saw today that, oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name. The dude that goes to Greece to try to convert him to his cult. You know what I'm talking about? The Protestant pastor.
Oh, the IFB guy?
Anderson. Stephen Anderson. Pastor Stephen Anderson. Yeah. I saw a post from him. I should have brought it up. I think I have it saved. I can pull it up. Of talking about how Orthodox, because of our Greek heritage, are still polytheist, and talked about how we're polytheist because we venerate saints, and we're pagan because we venerate icons. And it's such low tier argumentation. But I've been seeing, because I tuned into David Wood's chat when him and Andrew Wilson were going back and forth. I just wanted to see what people are saying. I'm curious. I'm always like a step away from the drama. So I'm looking and analyzing both sides. And it was astonishing to see how people were defending David Wood as, again, this idea that we're all Russian influence agents or something was plausible. Thought he was doing great in his presentation against Andrew. And again, just kept mocking the idea that we have an elevated position for Mary, which I don't even see how that's so controversial. If you believe that Christ is God incarnate and you believe that he gets his humanity from Mary, what is so difficult about calling her the mother of God? Or the Queen of Heaven. I saw somebody upset about calling her the Queen of Heaven and how this is a heresy and this is blasphemy against God. It's crazy. It's crazy the level of objection that they actually level. And this is why their arguments aren't strong. I mean, just look at Gavin Ortlund with Father Stephen DeYoung recently. It's not a great presentation. Like, they can't win. There's no out for them. And regarding consumerism, I believe that the lack of any sort of ascetical anthropology, the idea that we must actually pull ourselves away from the consumption of something, is totally an antithesis to Protestantism. I wrote down that Protestantism is essentially a self-improvement, self-help ideology, and that there is no understanding of a noetic healing. And it leads to and fosters a consumerist mentality because you have to self-help. And so then it's about self-expression. It's about personal fulfillment. And that's exactly how products are marketed to Americans. And it's like, but Protestantism is marketed and presented, and then they change. They're always evolving. And as we said, and this is just fact, whether you think, your conservative or traditional Protestant church in 2026 is legitimate, it is still way more liberal and progressive than their ancestor 200 years ago. You can't stop the process because built into the mentality and the presuppositions of Protestantism is consumerism. Oh, you don't like Pastor Billy Bob? Well, then you go over to Pastor John at the other church. And so it's fostered. And I really think America, due to its commercial and monetary abundance, has exacerbated this aspect of Protestantism. And that's where we get these mega churches and the prosperity gospel and all this stuff. It's uniquely, in a way, uniquely American, but it's very much already built into Protestantism itself.
Yeah. I just wanted to quickly follow up on, I think it was Subdeacon Michael, what he commented there, but
I didn't see it. Let me find it.
Yeah, he mentioned about, it was a comment he made about the fact that the Spanish had their own Spanish Inquisition, and he's actually more correct than he realizes. The number one job of the Spanish Inquisition was the opposite of what the famous Monty Python sketch was. And they were not fanatically devoted to the Pope. The first job of the Spanish Inquisition was to keep the Vatican out of the Spanish Empire. That was literally their number one duty. And given the history of the courts of the Spanish Inquisition and the Roman Inquisition, I can assure you, as a subdeacon, if you got in trouble for proselytizing in, let's say, 16th century, papal states or 16th century Spain, you would much rather go before the Spanish Inquisition than the Roman, because at least you get a lawyer, and at the end of the day, you'd only get a fine. So, they let you go. It's funny because the Spanish Inquisition gets heralded as this, like, oh, they were like so barbaric, and I'm like, dude, like, they were like the opposite. They really were. I mean, they were not. I'm not saying they were the great or perfect or anything. But it literally, like, compare them to like any the Roman Inquisition. Compare them to, because they were also an intelligence agency. Compare them to the CIA. Like, there's a night and day difference in terms of
right.
I would much rather, like, there's a night and day difference in terms of the morality of these two institutions. But yeah, it's so it's fascinating. That's why, like, the whole, like, today when I deal with like Anglo Catholics who got this very high view of the papacy, and I'm just looking at them like, all right, my ancestor Charles V marched on Rome and burned it down to, and he was a much better Catholic than you were. I'm just saying. So it's like, I know what my ancestors, how they lived the Catholic life, and I know that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
And that's part of the problem. That's part of the flea. It's the same thing with, like, I know, like, my dad was a diehard Puritanophile because, again, I was raised in this sect, but, like, so I read a ton of stuff on the Puritans. So I'm also aware of how the Puritans lived their life in New England. And it's really impressive, the stuff they did. Like, New England really has a very impressive history, and they've lost it. Like, they've lost it. It's, and unfortunately in their case, like, I know it was in 1700. I don't want to say it was Cotton Mather. It might've been him. I have to double check, but, like, there's a specific minister who essentially became the dominant force in Puritanism. And he was the one, because the Puritans were actually a holdout on the no usury, like a usury being a mortal sin. And it was just around the year 1700. That's when the flip happened. And you can see the gradual destruction of village life as it existed in New England among the Yankees, more and more towards a financialized society where, you no longer have people from the local congregational church coming together, building a house for the young people getting married. It's now, oh, you go get a mortgage from the bank to hire people to build a house, and then you live in it and you pay the bank. And it's like, I just look at that and it's just sad. Because I remember as a kid, like, because you're supposed to read your Bible and everything every day, which is a good thing. But I remember reading in Acts, and it's like, oh, they shared and held everything in common. I'm like, oh, interesting. This is communism. And everyone tells me that this is wrong, and yet it's here in Acts. And then when you read the history of like the Orthodox mirror, or like how the serfs lived in Russia, or how the peasants lived in Byzantium, or the peasants in even Imperial Spain and pre-schism Spain, or France, Pomerania. I did reading on Pomerania, the Scandinavian Bondi. You look at these different groups, and I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing it wrong, so all the Scandinavians can correct me in the chat. But the you look at how they lived, and it's crazy where it's like what I saw in Acts as a child, like reading, that didn't stop then. That actually persisted for more than 1,000 years in the West, and actually closer to 1,500 years. And it started dying in England. It started dying in the wake of King Henry VIII. What do you call it? And in the case of the Catholic world, it started decaying post Fifth Lateran Council outside of Spain. And then from within Spain, it was in the collapse of the empire. That's where you start seeing the death of that style of life, where it was stamped out intentionally. Like, for example, in Mexico, Juarez, who was a complete and total demoniac, like just maybe he repented at the end of his life, but the guy was like, he just instituted so much pure evil. Like literally he was the first, he was the first native president ruler of Mexico. What does he do? He steals all the land from the natives and hands it to like 12 families. So who are European stock, and we're Masons and we're Satanists. So yeah, that's Juarez. And that's why the city of Juarez across from El Paso, like El Paso is super safe. Juarez, which was named after him, its patron is literally a demoniac of hell. And it's super violent. Like, is that a surprise? But yeah,
who is their saint? Santa Muerte or what?
Yeah, essentially. But no, Juarez, like they named the city after him, and he's okay. The guy was literally just a demoniac.
You're saying he's okay, gotcha.
Yeah, he destroyed the traditional way of life that existed in what is now Mexico for centuries. Like, he completely destroyed it, concentrated all the wealth into 12 families. And even today, the wealth of Mexico is extremely concentrated in just a couple of hands. And that's part of why Mexico is it's going through essentially another de facto civil war. It's like the only person who actually had a vision and actually executed on it for trying to make Mexico function as a country was Porfirio Diaz. And he had serious problems. And I do have some critiques for him that I've written about. But like, the fact is, literally no one else even tried to have a functioning Mexico. It was always the oligarchs, whenever they're taking turns having power, it's just plunder everyone for everything they can repeatedly. It's just rampant, repeated kleptocracy. And the difference between Mexico and the United States is essentially the Mexican peasantry were less tolerant, ironically, less tolerant of corruption in their elite. So they simply stopped reporting. They stopped paying taxes, essentially, which is why Mexico has essentially always been dysfunctional in this regard. It's like, the people in Mexico City are corrupt, so they just don't pay their taxes. Everything happens in black market, gray market, completely off the books. Anglo-Saxons and especially what I'll refer to as New Germans of the Midwest, and even German Texans, they are unfortunately much more tolerant of the kleptocratic behavior of their ruling class. So unfortunately, I look at how, I'm working on a series right now, just like how utterly corrupt and how utterly greedy the American ruling class has been since 1776, like literally since Boston in the 1760s. And just how much the American elite have been parasites on the American people. And you look at what the United States has managed to accomplish with being ruled by parasites, with such a crazy hardworking population underneath it. So I just look at that. I'm like, man, what would Yankeedom, Dixie, New Germany, what would these peoples look like if they weren't ruled by satanic parasites? Like, what could they accomplish as a people? Like that's the thing that is, to me, it's a little depressing in terms of the history, because it's like, man, what good things America's accomplished, what feats the American people have accomplished has been despite the fact that they are ruled by parasites.
Right. Absolutely. And it's funny that then you look at the MAGA movement, and again, the heritage of Protestantism in America. The MAGA movement is very much, I would say, an American Protestant political movement, and how they venerate Donald Trump as the savior of America. You're looking at, again, Christian Zionism, at least among the boomers, isn't dissipating, but among the younger generation is on the decline. And this disenchantment, Max Weber's disenchantment thesis is tied with both Protestantism and science itself, rationalism, which he grouped those things into the same thing. And really, once the scientific revolution took off, science replaced the mystical underlying theology of pre-modern Christianity, and science then becomes that foundation, and everything's interpreted in rational means. And so Protestantism has contributed to this disenchanted world where there is no mysticism, there is no true participation in communion, and you look what the reformers did: remove the icons, destroy the monasteries, do away with relics. What Protestant pilgrimages are there? To go to Oxford? I mean, what do you do? Feast days, sacraments, all this stuff that the reformers did away with has contributed to this disenchantment where when people want to re-enchant the world, they either do it through consumerism or, especially in the American context, it's politics. Politics, I would make the case, is very much a Protestant sacrament in America. It's how you participate. Your candidate demonstrates your morality. Oh, I'm pro-LGBTQ. We got to save the trans kids. Well, you're Democrat. Oh, no, I want low taxes and, a strong military. We got to go kill the Muslims. Well, then you're Republican. We got to protect Israel. So much of the veneer of what America is colored by this Protestant heritage. And that's why there is this panic that's occurring amongst their apologists and their mouthpieces, because what are they going to do? They can't stop the disenchantment that they've already contributed to. And then they can't correct the re-enchantment that's occurring through psychedelics. That's through occultism. I was reading an article that Wicca is the fastest growing religion in the UK, outside of Islam becoming a larger demographic due to immigration, meaning people moving from one identity to self-identifying as a Wiccan. It's one of the fastest growing faiths in the UK. This is an attempt to re-enchant the world due to the world that we have inherited from Protestantism. And I know it seems like that's a really abstract and bold claim. But if you follow the history and you look at, intellectual history and the development of these cultures and societies, it's really in your face. It's hard to deny.
Yeah. And that's the thing, too, to take into account. It's I don't want to say like we're slaves to history per se, but because the fact is, if you want change, it's going to take time. And by time, I mean generations in general. Like
yes.
it's even for those of us who from Hispanic backgrounds or Anglo-Saxon heritage American Anglo-Saxon backgrounds or New German backgrounds, or my Minnesotan Swedes. The fact is, you walk into the Orthodox Church, like awesome. It's going to take generations for there to be the Orthodox society that you want to see, or even like the Orthodox village that you would love to live in. It's not going to exist in your lifetime. Right. It may exist in your great grandchildren's lifetime. That's I remember. I mentioned that in the last time I was on your show, but yeah, like a buddy who had asked the late Metropolitan Hilarion, like how long would it take for any of the peoples of the United States before they could have something like the Orthodox mirror, and the response was 300 years. So it takes time. Holy Russia was not made in a day. It took centuries. And even in the case of the Roman Empire, sure, Constantine legalized Christianity. It didn't become the state religion until Emperor Theodosius the Great, who was a Spaniard. So if you are Hispanic, there are
Edict of Thessaloniki.
Yeah, there are quite a few Spanish. There are two Orthodox, very prominent Orthodox saints. Emperor Theodosius and Emperor Theodosius the Younger. Both are saints. Both were Spaniards, and they were Spanish, and they were Christian emperors, and they were very pivotal in pushing Christianity in the empire.
I didn't know he was Spanish.
Yeah, he was a Spaniard. Theodosius was a Spaniard, full-blooded. So
I didn't. Interesting.
Yep.
I should have known that. For some reason, that one slipped me.
Yeah, no, that's why I've been putting that together, just because I've been trying to pick out prominent Orthodox saints that my Greek friends venerate. I'm intentionally trying to put together an icon collection of those for my kids. So be like, no, we were Eastern Roman emperors. This is, it's
but you make such a good point about this idealism, even amongst the Orthodox converts, thinking that America is going to be Orthodox, which is the goal. All right, I'm actually all for it. That's what my goal is, to get people to go to church. The whole point of this YouTube channel is for you to go to liturgy. just check it out. Just go to liturgy and talk with a priest. If I can get you in the door, then that's my job. That's what I'm trying to do here. But there is, I would even say, this idealism is a remnant of Protestantism, I mean, it's not equative, but you look at American Protestants and how they think they're going to fix things in one generation. We got to vote it into practice, or Joe Webbin's going to create the new, right-wing Christian nationalism that's going to save America. We don't need to think like that, because we are traditional. We need to think in generations, right? To be Orthodox is to think about time beyond your own lifespan. And when Orthodoxy is going to actually take root in America, I mean, it is taking root right now. It's becoming a cultural phenomenon in many respects. But for us to change the nation is going to be generations. And that should not be something that's like, oh, depressive. Oh, no. That's how it works. That should be exciting to contribute to that we're building a foundation right now. What's occurred since 2020 for the last 6 years is just building a foundation for Orthodoxy in its tentacles to grow and take root in America. And that's beautiful. But we can't be idealistic. We can't, be talking about, like some of the groypers that we're going to get a Catholic king, the Catholic emperor is going to save America. What are we talking about? That's not, it's just not reality. And even changing the political structure of America, I am an imperialist. I am a monarchist. I think that's the way that the church structured. I think, as the quote says, heaven is a monarchy and hell is a democracy. But we're not going to change that. That's not going to change in any immediate time span. So we have to work within the confines that we have and realize that even the political structures and the participation in politics and the reverence for politics, this is deeply Protestant. That somehow your nation, and America was the shining city on a hill, right? We were promised, the Protestants who came to this nation believed that this was the end point of history. And maybe to some degree they had a point in regards to a new age, especially once the full continental United States in the 20th century or late 19th century took root. But we have to be able to see that every aspect of American culture, and even the debaucherous things that the Protestants are trying to fight, they were the catalyst to the relativism, the personal interpretation, the personal judgment, the lack of any sort of asceticism, right? Protestant, there is no pulling away from the material world so that you can actually heal and cleanse yourself. That's not even part of their worldview. So a constant deepening of one's passions is tied with what I call this sort of self-improvement ideology. And that's what America's all about. The self-made man, which there's nothing wrong with working hard and becoming successful. But when that is the sole narrative of every person's life, there is no place for Christ. There is no place for humility. There is no place for submission, which is the whole point of the Christian.
Not sure why the old believers keep coming up in the chat. Like, y'all realize like a bunch of old believers have come back into ROCOR in the United States. I mean,
I think Don Key is a Protestant. I think he's upset with our takes right now or something. I'm not sure what's going on. Somebody correct us.
This is interesting. Like, ROCOR even has at least one bishop I know of who was raised in an old ritualist, which would be the descendants of those old believers who came back into communion, and actually was raised with doing the sign of the cross with two fingers, etc. Like, that's still valid. But yeah, the what do you call it? That's the other thing too. It's like, one thing I was thinking about, or one thing I've written about in the past, is how you look at modern man, and whether it be American or even Hispanidad today, because everything is just everyone in the West is Americanized effectively in this sense. Like, you're racinated in this regard. How many people have a duty to their ancestors? Like, you feel like you have a duty to your grandfather, your great grandfather, your great great grandfather, and having to continue a vision that they have. Like, how many people have that? And it's completely non-existent. It's very unusual, even in terms of like I know. Something Cleve did say, which is not Cleve. It was the Romanian fellow, the lawyer.
Alex Soren.
Alex Soren, yeah, which he said, which is very good observation, which is true, which is very true. I can confirm. Like, reality is, throughout most of human history, if your father was a blacksmith, your grandfather was a blacksmith, you're going to be a blacksmith. The idea that you're going to be free to choose something else just did not exist. It's you have family expectations, generational expectations. It's what do you call it? And that's the thing. Like, I know me myself. Like, I personally feel like I have a duty of things that I learned from my grandparents, my great uncles and great aunts, stuff that I learned about my great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather, stuff that I need to make sure passes down to the next generation. Because it nearly ended with my parents' generation, because my parents' generation as a whole like went Americanized and broke off from a lot of the like even like familial traditions. Like I'm not even talking about religious traditions, but familial traditions. And I'm like, my goal is like, all right, at least I had that bridge. You know, I had great uncles who lived to 100, great aunts who lived past 100. Thankfully, that one generation gap, one generation who abandons it is not the end of the world. You can still recover a lot of things and pass things down. The problem is for a lot of people in the United States, it's been more than one generation of intentional forgetfulness, of intentionally ignoring what came before, even in regards to family traditions. And that's a sad thing. And that's the thing about, like, one thing about Orthodoxy in general, like one of the big, what I describe as the big divide between, one of the big divides between Orthodoxy and papalism in terms of a ecclesiological view. Orthodoxy is both universal and it is local. Similar to, like, for any Hispanos in the chat, it's like fueros. You have the king, and you also have, your local fueros that you're held accountable to. And in the case of Russia, you have the czar and you have the mir, the local mir. So right. The local, like your familial traditions also matter. They matter just as much as, like, I want to hand my kids down the faith, of course, but I also want to hand down, like, what is it that makes our family as distinct from the other families around us? What is it? What are the local traditions of our locality, of our little corner of Texas that we live in, that makes it different from the rest of Texas? And what is it that makes Texas different from, Dixie? Because there is a massive, like, as much as Yankees tend to throw in Texas and Dixie together, they are exceedingly different. And, it's any man of the South will talk your ear off about that if you ever make that mistake of conflating the two. Right. So that's the thing.
Well, we got some objections in the chat here. Glowing Chariot says, so will Orthodox leave our Protestant nations for their perfectness? Again,
you don't have a nation.
What kind of argument?
Yeah, you don't even have a nation. Like, America is up for grabs. It is up for grabs for the whole world to take. No one, and that's the thing. The Supreme Court ruled on that on the whole, like, the birth tourism. So, like, dude, like, your elite as a class have completely sold out. Like,
yes,
like there is no nation that currently holds the reins of the U.S. government. It's literally a free for all at this point. Like, as the United States is heading down the path of the Western Empire, like, there is opportunity for those who see it. There is opportunity for men who build, to actually, like, build something that can last, that'll last through the collapse of the empire. Like, what comes next is going to be very, very different than what currently exists.
Yeah. No, and again, we're not saying that every Orthodox nation is perfect. We're talking about some of the problems that are uniquely Protestant. And again, we can compare, this conversation began with the decline in attendance rates. So go to a demographic map, go look at Eastern European nations and how many people are still Orthodox, even though you can easily say that, many Eastern European nations are secular in many sense, but the people are still Orthodox. The families that, and the ancestral ties that Jose's talking about, they're still there. The traditions are still there. Mm-hmm. What traditions are still present in America? I mean, we can't even say the Pledge of Allegiance in school or prayer without that being a huge problem. Like, what identity is left here in America? It's over, unfortunately. And we're not, again, it's unfortunate that's been the historical circumstance, but Orthodoxy is the one thing that can actually stop it, because we're a pre-modern world, or pre-modern religion, pre-modern worldview, paradigm. Catholicism, we've already brought up SSPX. Catholicism became more and more Protestant over the years, and very much Western Christianity. Protestantism, which includes evangelicals and Pentecostals and Catholics, is not going to stop. And to Jose's point, all those WASP and Catholic elites, they were part and parcel of the giving up of America and selling it for their own interest.
This is the great irony too. I just wanted to point this out, because this is the idea of, like, it is possible for someone to genuinely, like, be adopted into another race or ethnos. And, like, for example, like the Book of Ruth, like, that's the whole point there, that one of the big giant, points of that book, besides the Christological points, of course, which are more important, but it's definitely a sub theme there where Ruth says to Naomi, my people be your people, be my people, and your God, my God. If the irony is, like, you look at the Supreme Court, the man on the Supreme Court who is the most Anglo-Saxon, like genuinely most Anglo-Saxon who has a heart for Anglo-Saxondom is Clarence Thomas. So like it's and this is a great irony too. Like the reason why he's married to a white woman is because literally no black woman would marry him because of the fact that he was such an Anglophile. Like he genuinely like internalized Angloness. So he's one of the very, very few black men to actually do that. The other one, of course, being the internet famous reasonable black men from the 16th century. So,
and then Tanky Bot, and you know they're going crazy in the chat, says you have Orthodox nations, go there and make it great. Then maybe we'll listen to you.
Here's the problem with that. Well, one, so what do you call it? So Patrick is
I'm American.
He is American.
I'm Anglo stock. I'm heritage American stock. Where am I supposed to go? Exactly. I'm Orthodox because it's true, bro. Mm-hmm. Like, what are you talking about? Go somewhere else. I'm not a foreigner.
And here's
I'm
not
an immigrant.
Yeah. And here's the part. So unlike you, Tanky Bot, like David actually has the exact same faith as the man who essentially was the father of the Anglo-Saxon,
Alfred the Great.
King Alfred. Yes. Saint King Alfred the Great. Exact same faith. You don't have
one of my favorite saints.
Yeah. This is the irony. If you take an Anglo-Saxon from the 9th century and you drop him even into the Antiochian parish where Patrick is, he will actually recognize the entire pattern of worship. He will recognize it as Christian. Drop him into any single Anglo-American Protestant church, he will not recognize it as Christian.
Absolutely not.
That's just the reality. Like, I mean, I'm like, even in terms of like when people talk about like, you know, Romanism, like I already know, like my ancestors if I took Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand and I put them in a Catholic church today, they wouldn't even recognize it as like even schismatic. They wouldn't recognize it as Christian at all. Right. Like, that's just the reality. I could take King Charles V, put him into any of the churches in Peru or in Colombia. He would not recognize it. That's how much things have changed in the last 5 centuries.
And this idea that somehow Orthodoxy must be tied with the geographical place because, you know, the moniker Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, like you guys realize this is a faith, right? You realize this is the church literally from the apostles, whether you agree with it or not. We're talking about theology. We're talking about the cultures that are produced. The fact that America is only 250 years old and we're already witnessing the collapse of the empire should open your eyes that maybe there's a larger fundamental problem here. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's deeply rooted in our spiritual faith and our spiritual identity. Maybe the fact that America is Sodom and Gomorrah, LA and New York, according to the saints, maybe that should open your eyes. What is the largest export of America? And I'm a proud American. Again, I'm heritage American. My family, my especially my dad's line, we've been here forever. And my mom is 18th century. So what are you talking about? I'm Orthodox because it's true. And if we want to correct America, if we want to salvage anything that is good about what we have, and there are good aspects, we're not here to just bash America. The point is Protestantism created and catalyzed the problems that Protestantism itself is trying to fight. How can Protestantism fight feminism when it gave females the opportunity to be pastors? How can Protestantism fight homosexuality when half the churches have gay pride flags outside? Like, what are you talking about? Protestantism itself is not a united thing. What you guys don't understand in this obsession with Russia is that it's the same theology, whether it's Russia, Moldova, Greece, Romania, Serbia, it's the same faith. And what Orthodoxy does is sanctify nations. And that's what me, as an American Orthodox Christian, that's what I hope the faith is going to do in this nation, is it needs sanctification. This is a debaucherous culture right now. And it's unfortunate. And there's nothing that unites all the people in it. This is why there's so much internal fracturing and so much civil conflict. That's part and part. I mean, look at the cultural divide in America. It's very much like the Protestant church. Chair throwing Italian, hilarious comment, by the way. Thank you so much, brother. He says, "Ayo, you mean rap church ain't it? But the apostles were the first rappers, dog."
Fake dollars being Canadian. Oh, no, but that's a good one.
Again, and Tanky Bot, exactly. And Romania, Russia, and Greece have nothing to offer America. They're second world backwards. What are you talking about, bro?
Have you ever
So
been
because
there?
they don't, so is this an argument, an appeal to monetary success? You think theology, you think, so you're a prosperity gospel person? You
It's
think
like,
that God only
yeah.
blesses, the true Christian? So America's prosperity is due to its Protestant foundation and not to the fact that we're run by satanic pederasts? That, what are you talking about?
Ironically, the definition of a second world nation was a nation that was beyond the reach of the Bank of International Settlements. So, unfortunately, Romania and Greece are not second world nations anymore. They used to be, but not the case now.
But even if they are, what type of argument is that when we're bringing up Protestantism? Ivan, good to see you, brother. How you been, my man? Can't hear you. I think you're muted. No audio. But again, this obsession with like comparing GDP, like, so you're on the political bandwagon that as long as GDP goes up, America's great. So you can't afford a house. Tanky Bot, are you married? Do you have children? Do you have a stake in the economy? Do you have a stake in the actual debt? Oh, you don't? But as long as GDP goes up and America is monetarily successful, then that means that we've been blessed by God. Please show me that in the Bible. I'd love to see it.
Yep. I wanted to build on this, that one commenter mentioned about how if you walk into any of the Orthodox churches of different cultures, you will know that it's 20 minutes after the start. It's time for the reading of the Holy Scriptures. Same thing with 9th century Spain or 8th century Britain, which is what I think it's just amazing. It's like there's no other thing that exists, at least in the United States, where, because there are places you can go in Spain where you still have the ancient ruins and stuff, but there's nowhere else you can go in the United States where you can experience something that your ancestors experienced 1,200 years ago exactly the same way.
Okay, so TankyBot says, no, you made the argument that Protestantism failed because it produced modern America. It's not just modern America, brother. Look at every Protestant nation. That's what we talked about. Scotland, England, Sweden, Denmark, Germany. What are you talking about, man? Like, Protestantism is failing. There is no Protestant nation that you can clearly say, look at that culture. That is a Christian culture. There's no gay marriage. There's no mass immigration. There's no social justice warriors. Please point to the Protestant nation that is like that. We're talking about theological presuppositions and how over generations they bear fruit. They bear fruit in the cultures that they produce. And again, we're not saying that everything about America is wrong. We're saying many of the aspects that are wrong do have some element that's rooted back into the Protestant history and theology of the nation.
I was going to say, someone mentioned that Czechia won't exist in 100 years. There's actually one, whatever the Czech equivalent of county, there's one, their equivalent of county that's actually majority Orthodox. Yeah, they're doing fine. But I don't know if they're going to be able to repopulate all of the Czech Republic in 100 years. They are collapsing fast. I remember seeing Prague 19 years ago, and man, it beautiful. Like the history and everything that's there. It's sad how much is being lost. The Czech Republic and Europe and Poland were the only parts of Eastern Europe I've seen personally in person. And it's sad to me just how much you get the feeling of Blessed Augustine when, he's walking among the ruins of the Roman Empire. And you just have this knowledge that what you have now is but a fraction of what existed before. And what existed before is not coming back in your lifetime.
Right. This was his recent comment. The West with mass immigration is 100 times better than all Eastern Orthodox nations. America is only bad compared to America of the past.
It's definitely not true. I mean,
what a historically naive comment.
3/4 of your population are debt slaves. Like there's slavery has never been at more extent in the West than it is today, if you include debt slavery.
Absolutely. Ivan, sorry, brother. Can you say something? See if your microphone's working.
Can you hear me?
Yes. What's going on, brother? It's been a minute. How you been?
Perfect. I mean, lots of work. I've changed jobs. I'm surviving.
Good.
I wouldn't say thriving yet, but yeah, I'm buying myself stuff. I got my room, my AC, my stuff.
Good. Well, God bless you, brother. It's good to see you.
Where are you at now?
What are your thoughts on the topics today, my man?
So I'm a little bit more black belt. To answer to Jose, I'm living in Móstoles, which is like a city in the periphery of Madrid.
Okay.
It's more of like a working class city. Working as an English teacher, um, living like a super normal life, going to the gym, healthy. And in terms of the topic, I'm a little bit more black belt than you guys in the sense that I see the like we've experienced since I don't know, maybe 2016, a surge in terms of like interest about the spiritual, interest in the metaphysical, in a metaphysical realism, because as a reaction against wokeness. And like I think that kernel of truth will not disappear. I can even see it in companies that are now like completely against wokeness, but still not confronting it publicly, which is a positive change. But at the same time, I see like a wave of materialism that is seeping back in terms of like materially things are so bad, and politically we're so fragmented that the average person is not able to do without the kind of power plays that make you into a cynical materialist. Like, for example, right now I'm dealing with stuff that has to do with like workplace politics that is taking way too much of my time and energy, when I would like to like live a more quiet life. And the problem is I can't avoid it. Like, if I want to keep my job, I need to play this game because
Yep.
my competitors are smearing me, they're slandering me. And this is simply because I'm a heterosexual man. Like, if you are like a normal, regular guy, you're going to face a level of backlash that you need to like stand up and fight, and fight smart. And what I'm seeing is that the way the things are set up politically, people are too drowned with material concerns to really pour themselves into the spiritual proper. So that's why I'm black pilled. I don't see any political force dominating enough of the political discourse to shift things.
Oh
But
no,
maybe
I
that's
don't see a political solution either. I'm blown away. We got a Daryl 4880. We got so many Protestants in the chat, but nobody will hop on to just make their case for how Protestantism will save America. I I don't get it. They got a lot to say in the comments, but they won't jump on. Tanky, Daryl, you guys are more than welcome. We'll be cordial. We'll be respectful. Let's hear the arguments for how Protestantism is going to save America. I genuinely want to hear it.
I mean, just think about divorce rates. I mean, it's remember from Josiah, Father Josiah, Father Josiah Trenum, the divorce rate, like the first time divorce rate in Orthodoxy, or actually the total divorce rate is like 4%, which is one of the lowest rates of any subgroup in the United States. Like, how is marriage and family life formation happening in the Protestant world? Like, even where I am, like I'm in a rural place, but even where I am, most of the churches around here, they're dying. The only like the old school Baptist churches, obviously the Episcopalians, the Methodists, etc. People who do have families, they have much smaller families than they used to.
Yep.
The only things that are growing are either, and even the Catholics too, are shrinking as well in terms of family size. At least here, my specific little locale, like the only ones that have large families still, you're either Orthodox or they're usually like one of the house church non-denoms, which still have some family formation. However, many of them the people I know who've had large families in those circles will complain that many of their children are not forming families themselves, which is actually a pattern in the so-called non-denom, but it was its own restorationist Pentecostal group that it was. But even there, the same thing happened there. Like my parents' generation, a lot of people had kids, and then my generation, most people are not having kids. It's what do you call it? Like if you can't even get that right, if you're part of a sect that cannot even get basic family formation down right and keeping families married, like keeping couples married and keeping them fruitful, you're not going to exist in the future. It's just that simple. Like you look at the demographic data. I'm most familiar with Texas because I'm here, but what does the future of Texas look like given demographic data? 300 years from now, it's going to be a battle between Hindus, Muslims, and Orthodox Christians. That's what the future is dictated by. like who's going to actually show up in the future. And the retention rates for actually Hindu retention rates are not actually that high, and Muslims have a tendency to lose numbers to liberalization, secularization. But like you look at the rates among Orthodox Christians, even to appeal to Father John Whiteford, who's the dean of Texas and Louisiana. You look at the data; it's like if Dad goes to liturgy and goes to vigil and keeps his prayer rule, the retention rate for all of his children is 95%.
Wow!
So it's that's the other thing too. Like what the father does matters a whole lot more than what the mother does. If it's just the mother going to church, then the retention rate is 12%. To put that in perspective. So it really is like if you father children, you are taking on responsibility of the souls of the children you father.
Yeah. Well, if I may, I want to build off from what you said, Jose, but at the same time, I want to offer like a counterpoint in the sense that the reason why I was speaking about politics was not because I believed that there was a political solution, but rather because I see ideologies as, let's say, competitors for minds. For souls. So in the sense that like I agree with what he was saying in terms of like the fight for the future will be between Hindus, Muslims, and Orthodox Christians. I think there will be a huge secularization of lots of like based Orthodox values that we might even share with Muslims and Hindus simply because we're more masculine. So what I'm seeing right now is, for example, at least among the Spanish youth, there's a huge resurgence in terms of like traditional masculine values, and there is kind of like a cultural affinity with Catholicism, but at the same time, it's not like this deep spiritual conviction where people are actually going back to churches. It's more of a cultural, like I hate the foreigners. Yeah. And I'd rather keep my own customs. So it's what I'm trying to say is that there is kind of like a mixture between nationalism and neoliberalism that is kind of thrown into the mix and will like divide the traditionalists into different camps. So there will be neo-pagans, there will be the nuns, there will be like Catholics, Orthodox, Protestants, but I don't see that there will be much agreement in that sense. So that's why I'm more black-pilled.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's interesting enough. Saint Father Seraphim, Saint Seraphim of Patina. He actually said that himself in terms of, because what you're describing is using the facade of Spanish Catholicism is essentially as a front for an ideological position. Saint Seraphim he talked about that was the warning he had for Americans, which is reducing orthodoxy to an ideology instead of like an actual lived faith. And he was getting it, interestingly enough, or at least he didn't necessarily get it from that, but he was referring to is essentially it's described by Dostoevsky in his novel Demons. The character Shatov is an example, Dostoevsky's version of a Russian who reduces orthodoxy to merely an ideology and to nationalism. And what is the faith of Shatov worth? Absolutely nothing, and it leads him to his death. And even how Demons is structured as a story, essentially orthodoxy reduced to an ideology was in Dostoevsky's story. Essentially, Dostoevsky is essentially in the novel prophesies that it would die to Bolshevism, because there's a character in the novel Demons who he describes, and he's literally describing the physical representation of Lenin. And then when the guy speaks and he describes how he speaks and his voice and everything, it's literally Lenin. And everything he does, how he moves his hands and everything else, it's Lenin. Which is why Dostoevsky is referred to, even though he's not, canonized saint or anything, but he is referred to as someone who had the gift of clairvoyance, because it's very clearly the character of Lenin, and he's prophesying the Bolshevik Revolution in his book Demons.
Yep. Game Caller says Eastern Orthodox are destroying each other in the Ukraine-Russian war. If Protestantism is such a big issue, why is that happening? Again, how dumb. Do you guys even understand what the tensions are in the Ukraine-Russian war? Ukraine isn't even sovereign. They're run by NATO. They're run by the banking elites. They're run by the people that you guys say you're in opposition against. The BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, like the whole thing is an opposition to orthodoxy. Do you know that Zelensky already outlawed the actual Orthodox Church in Ukraine? Are you guys aware of that? What are you talking about? How does the Ukraine-Russian war disprove orthodoxy when Ukraine is a puppet of the Western elites?
And frankly, the fact is, unions and the unions that went, various flavors of American Protestantism, they're not Orthodox. You look at the voting, you look at the patterns, voting patterns and preferences across the Ukraine. You have a very clear coastal east versus the inside and west, and those lines were drawn with the Council of Brest with the formation of the unions. So it's very much the conflict that's happening right now is downstream from what the Jesuits did in the Union of Brest in Ukraine. This is very much it's essentially a consequence of the Great Schism.
Right. Yeah, like Alan Antonio said, Ukraine's run by a queer Jew.
Who is an Israeli, and his parents live in his Israeli mansion.
We have a question for you, Jose, but we got a guy. So I'm going to come back to the Bombasticus. I'm going to come back to your question. I promise I will. Steve the Turd throws in 10. Thank you very much, Steve. He says, the fruits of Protestantism are largely dingleberries. DPH, you and your fellows should consider putting together a homeschooling curriculum, please. That's actually a great idea. That's something Jose and I should work on. And then he said, for the grift, thanks, DPH. Well, thank you, Steve the Turd. Thank you so much, brother.
And Steve, I want to let you know, just the goal of my writing of books, I realize I'm not going to make much money from it, but the goal is to write stuff that can be used in the homeschool curriculum. So that is my end goal. And
we had someone jump up. Icon Corner. Welcome, brother.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I appreciate this stream.
Well, thanks for joining, man. What are your thoughts on the topic?
Well, as a former Protestant preacher, I can say you're spot on. Protestantism cannot save America. And one of the reasons that it cannot is its whole establishment is division. It started by being a division and has divided ever since. So how could it ever heal division when its whole purpose is division?
Right. So how long were you a Protestant pastor?
About a decade.
In what denomination?
The Churches of Christ.
Oh, Church of Christ.
Yep.
Well, I will give them, and shout out to Zach if he's in the chat. He was my introduction to Church of Christ. He grew up in Church of Christ and sponsored a stream that forced me to dive into essentially the Protestant attempt to be somewhat apostolic in the Church of Christ. I will give them that. But yeah, to your point, the fundamental divisions already in Protestantism and really from the get-go, from the Reformation forward, has only been a continuing catalyst for what we're seeing in the West. And that's not to say, and I think some of the people in the chat are acting like I'm saying every Protestant is a terrible person. My parents are Protestant. My family's all Protestant. I love my family. I can be against Protestant theology and the historical fruits it's bore and not hate every single Protestant. That is a low IQ take on what we're trying to lay out today.
Also,
so Icon, go ahead, Jose.
Yeah, I just want to say to Icon Corner, there's the county east of me has a bunch of Church of Christ churches, and so I have friends who go to them. But it's interesting because none of them recognize each other as being legitimate.
That's accurate. I'm sure that's accurate. Even within the Churches of Christ, there are divisions of preterists and non-preterists. There's antis, liberals, conservatives, one-cuppers, head coverings. I mean, it spans the gambit. So even within the church that claims to be the restored church, there's still division upon division upon division, even within it.
Yep. And I grew up in the sect I grew up in was essentially a blending of like the Stone Campbell stuff with Pentecostalism, which horrified some of my Church of Christ neighbors when I told them, like, yeah, that's a thing. So
some more Stone than Campbell.
Exactly.
So people are telling me I need to address this comment. Kelia Saleh says, as a Romanian, I think you Americans are deluded about what orthodoxy is. How are we deluded? How are we deluded? Yeah. Are you Romanian Pentecostal? Are you Romanian Orthodox? I don't know. So if any, okay, he says Orthodox Christianity is not something to make your life better. Who said anything? That was my argument against the Protestant, brother. What are you talking about? I don't even get some of these criticisms.
Yeah, they might be agreeing with you. But yeah, it's although I will point out, we do pray in the marriage service for financial success for the married couple so that they can use it for their children as well as for their community. Right. So there is an element of, because even like Paul talks about, was it in Colossians where, well, first, a man who, not in Colossians, but he said, I forget where he wrote it, but a man who doesn't provide for his own is worse than an unbeliever, worse than a pagan, worse than an unbeliever. But then also in Colossians, he says that, you should generate more than you need so that you can share with those in need.
Icon Corner, I'm curious, what are your thoughts as a former Protestant pastor with some of the latest prot-slop drama online? Seems like obviously the hottest debate right now is between Protestants and Orthodox going on in the U.S. What are your thoughts on all that?
Just the stuff that I've seen, it's mostly just been the same nonsense. I mean, in the churches of Christ, we were constantly debating with the Baptist over faith alone and Calvinism, and it was the same stuff. And so when I see it online today, it seems like the exact same things are being rehashed all the time. And I really think that is the fruit of evangelicalism specifically, because once they kind of went the route of, well, once you're saved, you're always saved, and nothing you can do can break that kind of event in your life. Well, what is to stop you from, when they go into the rainbow issues, what is to stop you? Because once you're saved, you're always saved. So, I mean, what does it really matter? And so the more you kind of push this narrative that once saved, always saved, and you were selected to be saved no matter what you do, well, you kind of just invite the decline of your church openly.
Yeah, and I think that's why they're freaking out, is they're hemorrhaging parishioners, but then their apologetics just has no meat to it. And I think David Wood's latest claim that we're all KGB agents, like, my God, I wish I was getting paid. I wouldn't have to stress so much about financials for me and my wife. I wish, the Kremlin was backing all of us with thousands of dollars. That would make my life easier. That's not the case. And it's so low tier. And their arguments for even how they come to the conclusion that is this idea that if you're Orthodox, somehow you're tied to Russia. Like, I'm Antiochian. I'm in an Arab-based Middle Eastern, the first place where people are called Christians. I belong to that archdiocese. How does that have anything to do with Russia? Like, what?
Yes. That was one of the funny things. So my first video one of the first videos I posted was, why did a Church of Christ preacher leave for Holy Orthodoxy? And one of the comments I remember was, for the money. And I was like, if you knew the money I lost, I was a minister. Like, I didn't have a second career. That was my life. So it was not for the money. I can promise you that.
There is no money in it. It's like I have a friend who was a pastor in the Lutheran Missouri Synod, and he left that for Holy Orthodoxy, and he went from being comfortable to being completely and totally broke. And that's the path. That's actually the biggest obstacle for a lot of men who are ministers for jumping to Orthodoxy, because the fact is, in a lot of Protestant sects, you have some level of, you do get some level of seminary training, and you do get some. Eventually you get questions you get asked by even people in your own congregation to dive into the history, and it takes very little. One second, my kid is calling. Well, it's not here, Rodrigo. What do you call it? But yeah, the gist of it is, as they dive down deeper, it's inevitable they find Holy Orthodoxy. Like, even like in the sect I grew up in, like, the fact is, like, I was being cultivated for ministry work, and I end up in Orthodoxy. What happens when I go Orthodox? They select one of my cousins to essentially take the path that was intended for me. He dives down into stuff. What ends up happening? He walks into Orthodoxy. So it's like, it's even here, even in my, like, the small town that I live in, like the one Methodist church, his kids are now Orthodox. The one of the more prominent non-denominational churches, every single one of their pastors have kids who are Orthodox catechumens. And it's actually a recurring thing with some of the networks out here. A lot of it's interesting, but at least out here in the middle of nowhere, Texas, where I'm at, the people who are coming to Holy Orthodoxy are the children of the ministers. Because, and I think part of it is because their parents do have them read the scriptures. Their parents do have some stuff about church history, and they don't have the financial ties keeping them chained to where they are. And they just say, all right, Dad, I'm making the jump. If you can't make it, I'm making it. And they do it.
Mm-hmm. David, welcome, brother. Are you Protestant, Orthodox?
Neither. I don't like to use the word Protestant because it could be, I feel like, a loaded term, but I wouldn't say I'm Eastern Orthodox or.
Well, if you're not Catholic, Oriental, or Eastern Orthodox, then you have to be Protestant based on the presuppositions. That's the only option you have.
I know that's what people would consider it. I just don't like to use that term because it can be considered like it could be loaded with certain theology, like stuff from John Calvin and Luther.
Oh, okay.
So if that makes
right. We would consider those denominations, but Protestantism is the overarching branch. Sola Scriptura, Sola Fide, Sola Gratia, the 5 solas. So, tell us what are your thoughts then on today's topic? Are you disagreeing? You think that Protestantism can save America, or a denomination within it can? What's your opinion?
I think. Well, I'm a Christian. I think that I think what is good, and I know a lot of Orthodox would say this as well, is that we should try to see what the early church taught and implement that as being what not just what Scripture says, but also what the tradition is from the apostles that were given down. I know that would be the claim of Orthodoxy that there's full continuity with what the early Christians would believe. I don't see that as true, but I would want to be like what I think the church in America should try to be in continuity with those early Christians, if that makes sense. I think that would be helpful to the people of God in America, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. My follow-up question would immediately be, to practice Christianity like the early church, wouldn't that demand the intercession of the saints, oral tradition, which Protestantism wouldn't have access to because that was passed down through the generations amongst the clergy, amongst the laity that participated? So sacraments, for example, I mean, how can Protestants talk about turning back to the original faith when sacraments themselves are typically symbolic?
Like in their churches, you mean? The symbolic?
Yeah, I mean, you can refer back to high church Protestantism, Lutheranism and Anglicanism, but look at their hierarchies. They have, the Archbishop of Canterbury is a woman that's pro Skittles. So even the high church, I mean, because that'd be the one when I've talked with Protestants, it'd be like, oh no, yeah, I'm against all the degeneracy. I'm high church Anglican. It's like, we believe in the sacrament. It's like, but come on, dude, you have basically a pro lesbian female archbishop. Like, what are we talking about?
No, yeah, I think that's I think Christians should believe that, for instance, the Eucharist is not just symbolic, or baptism. I think the early church was pretty clear on that baptism is for the remission of sins, and that the Eucharist is not just a symbol, that we're partaking of Christ. So I think that, say, if a Roman Catholic or an Eastern Orthodox debates a Protestant on these things, they could make them look bad because I think they're holding to positions that would be closer to what is historical, whether you want to get into the details of substance and et cetera. But his presence is really in the Eucharist, right? So I think that is true. I think that those two subjects can convince somebody to become a Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox. The issue with me is I don't think that full continuity with what the ante-Nicene writers spoke about in unanimity would be what Eastern Orthodox would hold today. I see this as and there are things within Protestant, certain people that are Protestant.
Give me an example.
Yeah. War. Just war theory is one. I would say that the early Christians, in the 2nd century who wrote about this were against the idea that Christians were to, for instance, to physically fight war or to.
Have you heard of Saint George? Have you heard of Saint Demetrius? They were soldiers.
Mm.
That's pre-ecumenical council. So when we're talking about early church, I mean,
are they the 4th century, 5th century?
Yeah. So early 4th century was the reposing of Saint Demetrius, who was a Roman soldier who was jailed because he was Christian. He wouldn't recant his faith.
Mm-hmm.
So orthodoxy regarding war, I mean, and there's a great book, Father Stephen DeYoung has one, says God is a man of war. And we have multiple theologians and clerics that have spoken on this specific topic regarding violence. Now, we don't have a just war theory like the Catholic Church. That's the difference between our position on the Crusades, right? Like holy war. There is no idea of a holy war in Orthodoxy. We consider war to be a tragic necessity due to the fall. But we're not pacifists. The church has never, ever been a pacifist church. And that'd be something that we would be very different than some of the early Protestant faiths that like the Quakers that promoted pacifism and something like that. When the Ottoman Turks are coming to take Constantinople, the Holy Orthodox faithful had to stand and fight. Many of them were slaughtered. They died. I mean, so
would your position be like the early? Because what I would say is, I think, of course, you can find at some point in the 4th century, and people like Augustine who ended up promoting his idea of just war theory, if you want to say that, people that ended up giving reason in their mind of Christians to fight. But from what I understand, if I'm looking at like people in the 2nd century, Irenaeus, Justin Martyr, Tertullian goes into detail, even to the point of how Christians shouldn't even be in the military. Irenaeus,
but Tertullian's also not a saint because he believed in a bunch of other stuff too.
I think there's also something else to add to that. And before the 4th century, if you were a Roman soldier, one of your jobs would be to round up and arrest and put Christians to death. It would be very difficult to be a Christian rounding up your fellow Christian brothers and sisters and putting them to death.
To be a Christian, putting your Christian.
So, and David, an easy historical example is Constantine. So he's a saint of the church. That's before the ecumenical councils, he went to battle with the pagan half of the Roman Empire to win at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, and then establish the Edict of Milan, legalizing Christianity for the first time. So we do believe that God can use, unfortunately, violence and battle for providential purposes. But at the same time, us Orthodox versus like Catholics, for example, this would be a perfect example with the Crusades, is if you do kill someone and say it's totally justified in the eyes of the church, you still will be pulled from the Eucharist for a while, because no matter if it's justified or not, and same thing is true for me. If someone breaks into my house and it's just me and my wife and I have to take lethal action, I won't be able to take the Eucharist for probably a year or so.
So they would still consider it sinful. They would just allow.
It's not a sin. It's that violence and killing someone distorts your soul, and you must go through a process of healing before you can be brought back into the Eucharistic body. But it's not.
So they would say it distorts somebody's soul, but how does a soul be distorted?
Because violence is part of the fall.
Well, like how does a soul be distorted without somebody opening the door to sin? That to me, that
May I chime in?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think the disconnect is because David doesn't understand that from the Orthodox perspective, we're not making a prescription based on a 100% certain prognosis. Right? We don't know what happened to the person's soul. We're just removing them from the chalice because it's dangerous to their soul. We don't know if they're sinful, right? What we're doing is, given the fact that something extreme happened, we are protecting this person from the potential fallout if there had been serious sin. That's what I understood from that. But
Oh, did David leave? Jose Antonio, sorry, brother. I know you've been waiting your turn.
Could you
What are your
still-
thoughts on today's topic? Are you Protestant? Are you Orthodox?
Dude, first of all, I appreciate this a lot also. And hi, everybody. I mean, this is my first Orthodox, and thanks to the to the online conversation since 2020, I've been seeing Jay Dyer, Church of the Eternal Logos, everybody else. And I mean, that's helped me a big bunch in my journey since I came
Glory to
out
God,
of
man.
atheism, and then, exploring the different sects and
Mhm.
Roman Catholicism. And of course, this is what makes the most sense. And regarding the topic, it kind of makes sense to me. Having an extreme situation, like having to fight for your life and fight another person's life, to actually have a spiritual consequence with that, right? And the church having a structure to deal, a spiritual structure, a coherent structure to how to deal with that. I mean, I think it should be quite evident, comparing also to what David Patrick mentioned of what Roman Catholicism considers on it. And I'm not sure even Protestants ever even have a structure like it. In any case, I also have a couple of questions, and just one main one.
Okay.
Looking at the current conversation between Orthodox and Protestants,
Mhm.
why do we as Orthodox sometimes avoid pointing out some of the actual fruits and consequences of Protestantism? Maybe I'm a little bit
Like
off
what
myself.
specifically?
Yeah, for example, I see something weird in the fact that Engels comes from a Calvinistic family. Marx, even though he came from a certain type of people,
Yeah, he became
but
came from a certain
Luther.
tribe.
Yeah, but he became Lutheran. They became Lutheran. Nietzsche also was Lutheran. So,
Mhm.
I mean, there's a lot of, I guess, great fruits in Protestantism, but also seems some things strange. Like, what about the wars between the Catholics and maybe some other extreme stuff? Why aren't those things ever brought up in the conversation? It's as if, and as I kind of see it, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I guess some also the push against what Christians were doing maybe uh, made some people consider secularism and after the Protestant Reformation, and then maybe actually kind of made both Western Christianity a little bit more tamed because of it. Maybe it's because some secular influence, considering all the damage that was being done between the wars between Catholicism and Protestantism. So why aren't these things brought up?
I feel like I try to talk about them regularly. I mean, when you're talking about secularism in particular, secularism really emerges after the Reformation. And my argument would be that the Reformation, one, divorcing itself from tradition and the sacraments, and especially a few generations after Luther, now you're into a place where it's basically full ideology. And what was precipitous to the 30 Years' War was the attempt to create a Protestant Hermetic kingdom, right? That's what the first battle at White Mountain was about, is killing and stopping the movement behind Frederick the Elector Palatine, who was combining the Rosicrucian desire for this universal brotherhood, mixing essentially the mysticism of alchemy, Hermeticism, magic, the occult, Kabbalistic ideas with the Protestant faith, because for them, Protestantism had the right doctrines, magic and all these other things had the right mysticism and its engagement to culture. Well, that gets annihilated at the beginning of the 30 Years' War. And I would argue that then once you get to the scientific revolution, once you're in the mid 1600s, after, the Royal Society is founded in 1660. And so then you get to a place where now science becomes the ultimate explanation for everything that exists. There is no underlying mysticism. It's not about tradition. It's not about spirituality. It's not about what the church says. It's scientism begins to replace the authority of the church. And so once you get there, and once then Protestantism sits on top of the foundation of science, it's just this continuing progressive narrative that has led to the present day, where, you know, a lot of people don't believe in miracles anymore. You know, all this type of stuff where it's an incredibly rationalistic faith. So I wouldn't say that Protestantism equals secularism, but Protestantism in its ideology and its theological framework and debasement from mysticism and participation allowed for science to fill that baseline as the ultimate explanation for everything that exists.
And also connecting that with the way the Bible also presents information, and sometimes giving reversals, right? I see a big reversal in what Western Christianity produced after the schism, and it's quite evident even with the Western schism situation, is that, of course, what Pentecost happens in, sorry, I said that badly, but in any case, Christ reverses the situation with the Tower of Babel, right?
Correct.
And we have a unity in the church under the Holy
Correct.
Spirit.
Correct.
You see, in a reversal of that is in Western Christianity, where there's actual dissemination of the identity of the church, especially in Protestantism. And I've only seen just a couple of people mention that, but those things are very hardly mentioned at all in the conversations between especially evangelicals and Orthodox. And I think these are great points, because it's actually what's evident in history, and the point we've gotten, the spiritual point that whole society, Western society and Latin American society where I'm in, you can see that.
Right.
It's actually very evident.
Shout out to my buddy Zach, former Church of Christ. So Icon Corner, former member of your neck of the woods, says the only thing that unites Protestants is their hate for the Orthodox faith. And I see Manuel in the chat is basically saying that he's a Protestant Christian nationalist, and the problem with Orthodoxy, we're trying to steal America from the Protestants. So interesting take. And major thank you to Kev Phillip for becoming a Coda Crew member. And guys, if you appreciate my work, please help me reach the super chat goal. Send any question, comments in using Dono Chats, Streamlabs, or here on YouTube. We got Joshua. What's going on, brother? Are you Protestant?
No, I'm actually I'm a catechumen.
Oh, glory to God.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on today's topic, my man?
Well, it's funny because I was just looking into it today. Oh, hold on. That's your video plan. Like, the more I look into it, it seems like it's just an arch. I'm looking into the Byzantine Empire right now. And it just seems like we found the pinnacle of truth and civilization right there. And it just, from the split, the schism, from Catholicism to Protestantism to secularism, and it's just going down. Like, nihilism is next.
Yep.
Complete, total, maybe tyranny, you know.
Yeah.
And it just seems like the pattern is so clear, and it's kind of crazy that nobody sees it. It feels like since I became Orthodox, everything is just like very clear. It's like a blessing and a curse.
Yeah. Well, what I always describe, and maybe you'll back this up, is that Orthodoxy in its journey through your spiritual process is a recapitulation of Christ giving eyes to the blind man. And that as we journey with Christ, as we dive deeper, things fall into place. I mean, this was my experience, and I'm not using this as an apologetic tool that if you want to understand geopolitics, become Orthodox. That's not what I'm saying. But looking at the world, looking at culture, looking at history, everything begins to fall into place when you look at it through the frontum of the church. Yep. And you can't give that to someone, right? That's the thing about Orthodoxy. I always tell people it's a journey, man. This is not an altar call. Like, you have to, and I'm sure for all of us here, there's a point in which you're reading, you're looking into history, you're seeing things, and you start to piece things together. And then once you get into the church and once you start growing in the faith, it all begins to fall into place. And you want to give that to people, you want to share it, but they can't, because you have to walk it, right? Because Christ literally has to do the work in changing your perception of the world.
I've been humbling myself a lot lately. Every time I think I've made like a lot of progress, I realize I haven't. Or it's like I have, but there's so much more to go.
Right.
Yeah. And going into the church, and like you were saying, it does change. It changes reality. It's like the Protestantism is like materialistic.
Yes.
It's almost like you're separate from God. The world's separate from God, where the metaphysics that I'm like St. Maximus is blowing my mind. It's like all these new age things pick little pieces of the truth and then just made up something out of one part of it. Like everything in the whole modern world is inverted.
Right. Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
I call that trying to take a little piece of Christ's body for yourself. So even ideologies like liberalism, communism, whatever, it's just like little pieces of Christ, but they're disconnected from everything else.
To your point, Jose, it's that anything, I mean, all these ideologies, communism, there's aspects of it that are true, right? About, an idea of a collective identity over an individualistic identity of the West. Okay, we can appeal to that. And they take these little pieces of truth, which is always going to be rooted in the logos. It's always going to be rooted in something related to, again, the total worldview of orthodoxy. And then they distort it for their own purposes, and it becomes bastardized. And it's something that's very, very different and takes people off the trajectory towards Christ. But it's true with everything. I mean, social justice, for example, you can understand what people are wanting, but then it inverts the idea of justice. It takes equity to a new place. It's not about equality of the dignity of individuals. It's about an equity of historical injustices that must be overcome. And so they take initially true things and then they invert them, which is part of what you're saying with the total inversion of the world. Jose Miguel, were you going to say something, brother?
Oh, I just noticed people were launching a AI discussion and everybody speaking on ignorance. But I just wanted to say that there's a one Orthodox fellow who's very much a pioneer in large language models, AI, over in Russia, who is devout Orthodox. And I like how he put it as there's no intelligence in AI. What it is predetermined programmatic decision making. And it's a very powerful tool that people are only beginning to figure out how to use it. The great irony is the materialism of the West is why AI is not going to be serving the purposes of the West. So China and Russia both will essentially leave America in the dust on that issue, or with that technology. But anyway, I know it's kind of a separate. I was just paying attention to stuff on the chat on that.
Well, while we got you, there's a question specifically for you. The Bombastic has said, how did Latin America become so corrupted, wicked, and sexually immoral? Even some of the last Spanish strongholds like Puerto Rico became like this. And you are the guy to talk to.
So I'll start with the general pattern of what happened for everyone except for Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Dominican Republic, because those were the exceptions. But yeah, the general pattern is literally in the wake of the revolutions, you had literal Satanists ruling from Tierra del Fuego to San Francisco. And it was very intentional policy to degrade and destroy the church. So the destruction of the Patronato Real meant that the Spanish church was no longer held together as a unity. Technically, it was directly underneath the Pope, but the Pope were more interested in the wealth extraction, essentially. You then had a massive increase in syncretism, which was encouraged by the Masonic ruling elite. And while Masonry in the United States is still a joke, I can assure you, in Mexico and Colombia, the Masonic brotherhoods there have real power. Even I have a cousin he tutors the ruling class, the kids of the ruling class of Colombia, and everybody's Mason. Like you want to get into power, you want to get in actual rooms where decisions are made for that country, you have to be a Mason. So that's where it comes. It's degeneracy that was pushed from the top down. And whenever you had someone who was fighting against it, they always end up getting killed. Emiliano Zapata would be an excellent example of an individual who actually, it's interesting because he got redefined, the PRI redefined him as being a revolutionary, when in reality he was a counter-revolutionary who was fighting for the restoration of fueros, for the restoration of how things ran in Mexico underneath the Spanish crown and the Spanish church. And that's why he was assassinated. So that's the general push. So it's been a 200-year process. Even like, for example, Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, literally created by the Mexican government, and it was put at the same time as the feast day of All Saints, in order to essentially direct people away from All Saints toward Dia de los Muertos. So intentionally, a lot of the resurgent paganism you're seeing, it's funded and pushed by the ruling class, and it's not even like, it's not paganism in the sense of what was practiced by the Nahua, 500 years ago. It's neo-pagan, and ironically, a lot of Jewish influence in there, which is ironic because Bernal Diaz, in his writing of the conquest of Mexico, when he and not before Cortez, it was one of the early expeditions he did, when they encountered the Nahua religion, or the religion of the Maya and the Mexica peoples for the first time, they actually thought that rabbis had showed up in Mexico before they did, because a lot of the practices of the worshippers of the native gods, of the Mayan gods, of the Aztec gods, etc. There are a lot of practices concerning magic that reminded them of Kabbalah, or Jewish mystical practices, as well as the how do you say it? And how do I say it without essentially butt magic? I guess is how the
Crowley magic.
Yeah, like that was very much present. And so like wherever Cortez was going, he was like, you cannot do sodomy, you cannot do this, that, the other thing. And there were specific things they banned. They didn't require people to convert on the spot. Like there are even cases like certain tribes where it's like, okay, all we require of you is no cannibalism, no sodomy, no human sacrifices, no abortion, no infanticide. It's fascinating because Bernal Diaz will describe the reactions of some of these chieftains, like very powerful chieftains who commanded armies of more than 40,000 men. So these were not, they were civilized in a sense, and they did have serious numbers, especially when you consider that, at the time Cortez was marching with 400 men. But, they would look at them like they did not understand, like, what kind of God would give his own blood instead of demanding his human worshipers to give their blood. And that was something that really threw them for a loop. And ironically, in the case of cannibalism, because I know the men who were in charge, and ironically, there were several women who learned the faith first who helped with the translation of stuff. One of the things that stuck with the push against cannibalism, what they taught the natives was, so you are what you eat. So if you eat a human, you're becoming. If you eat your enemy, you're becoming like your enemy. But if you eat Jesus Christ, you become like God. And that's actually how they got them to stop doing cannibalism. But yeah, in terms of that's the general push throughout most. Puerto Rico is a different case, and it's a very sad case. So Puerto Rico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, they were loyal to the Spanish crown. The Dominican, I actually do love the Independence Day of Dominican Republic because it's not celebrating the independence from the crown. It's celebrating the independence from Haiti, because the first Haitian guy conquered Dominican Republic and tried to exterminate them. And they essentially, after 2 decades of violence, managed to kick him out and drive them back to their third of the island, which is why Haitian-Dominican Republic relations are the way they are. The fact is the Haitians tried twice to genocide the DR. So that's why there's not much love between the two, and all the people who project their racial theories onto it. It's like, yeah, no, black supremacists are brutal, or just as frankly, just brutally genocidally evil. But in the case of Puerto Rico, so the sad thing with Puerto Rico is, like, my wife is Boricua. All of her ancestors at the time, all of them, none of them were Masons. All of them were monarchists. All of them were loyal sons of the Spanish Church. When America took over Puerto Rico, it was the golden. It was literally the rich port of Spain. It was very developed when it was part of Spain back in 1898, and the Americans plundered it like crazy. It's what do you call it? So in the case of Cuba, for example, when the Americans took over Cuba, the mafia ran rampant like crazy. Human trafficking, it became essentially sex tourism spot for the American ruling class, children included. As much as I dislike Fidel Castro, the one thing I will always give him praise for is he took every member of the mafia he could get his hands on and unalive them publicly because of what they did to children. So that's, like, the American elite were thoroughly demonic 130 years ago. Like, it's long before Epstein Island, before the Federal Reserve, this evil was there. So you had the intentional, in the case of Puerto Rico, like, for example, reggaeton, Reggaeton comes from Jamaican dancehall music, and that was brought to Puerto Rico by Jews with the blessing of the American government. So Puerto Rico is a case of a society that was intentionally degraded and subverted by the American elite for more than 4 decades. It was a policy by the federal government. It's referred to colloquially as La Operación, which was a program of mass sterilization of women. So, like my wife's paternal grandmother, she had 13 kids, and she always told all of her daughters, she had 8 daughters, all of them said, don't go to hospitals. Girls that go to hospitals can't get pregnant again. And that was the case in the reality. Her maternal grandmother only had 5, and she had her 5th at the age of 22. Her husband was 24, and they got married she was like 15 when they got married, because people got married young. But yeah, which was normal back then, by the way. But yeah, the point is, like, they did not suddenly have a brother-sister marriage after her 22nd, after her fifth baby. There were complications. She had to go to a hospital. Never got pregnant again after that. And that was so essentially it was like man, I forget the exact number, but it was close to like 40% of Puerto Rican women in the 20th century were sterilized by the U.S. government. So you had this intentional program of just destroying everything within Puerto Rico, and that's why, like, it's today it's a mess. Like, I've been to the island. It is a broke mess, and it's crazy because you can read about how Puerto Rico was in the 19th century, and it was a developed country. It was a first world. It was part of the first world, and under American treatment of it, essentially, it's degraded to it's more backwards than the Dominican Republic, which, you know, and to be fair, the Dominican Republic is actually doing pretty well, relatively speaking. But that's you had intentional America. So for most of Latin America, it was by the ruling class themselves. For the parts that were directly conquered by America, it was the American ruling class just intentionally pushing. And the fact is, the Catholic faith simply does not have the strength to stand up to that kind of evil. And that's why, you know, as much as the topic of this panel is supposed to be how Protestantism won't save America, you know, I got friends who are Anglo Catholics who converted to Catholicism, and I can already tell you, I've already seen the history of my people. No resistance is coming out of Catholicism to this nonsense. And sure, Russia has problems, Romania has problems, Greece has problems, but look where there's actual resistance happening. And this is something I noted, something I wrote recently that we published at the end of the month. But Metropolitan Morphu is even talked Neophytos. He's talked about how the opposition to Clown World is essentially an unwilling trio of Russia, of China, and Iran. And what's interesting about those three is none of their respective religions, Orthodoxy, Shia Islam, or the Confucianism or Neo-Confucianism of Wang Hunan and Xi Jinping, none of them have none of them have the heresy of nominalism in their respective faith. Likewise, the Iranian Shia do not have like the occasionalism of the Sunni, which you find in Wahhabism and others, which frankly makes them, which is why they get played so well by Israel and the United States and Great Britain. But you know, it's fascinating to me that that's where you see the resistance. Like, the only group calling itself Christian where there is produced real resistance is Orthodoxy, and that's just the reality. So it's going to Protestantism, going to Catholicism, or Spanish Catholicism, or French Catholicism, take your pick. You're returning to a system that cannot stand up to the evil that currently rules the Babylon that is the Judeo-Anglo-American Empire.
Right. Since we are leading into July 4th, and given a major thank you to Sarah from Rosario for the $5 super chat, I think it'd be interesting to speculate on where do we think that the U.S. is going to be in the next 50 years? Because right now we're celebrating, you know, birthday 250, you know, of our country, which again, in the timeline of history, is so brief that it you know, compared to actual other empires and other nation states, it's not very long at all. And we're already witnessing the decline. What do some of you guys think is going to be the state of America in 50 years?
I think it's going to be some sort of dystopian thing going on, mass addiction everywhere. I mean, maybe not, you know, there's like, if it goes back the traditional way, which we are seeing, like I see 10 new people at the church every week, which is awesome. So, you know, it could totally go that way, but you know, that's not what we're told is going to happen.
Well, if we look at the younger generations right now, per capita compared to previous generations, we have the most socially conservative generation coming up that's came up in a very long time.
True.
So
we're tired of it.
It appears that its trajectory is changing. Now, why is it changing? If you look at the younger generation, they're all headed back towards ancient Christianity. They've realized when you put children in these youth groups, and the youth group is nothing but K-Love songs, right? There's no substance to it, and the whole church becomes that because they model everything around getting the youth and keeping the youth, and so everything is just about, it's an infantile version of faith. And when things get difficult and you start looking around and you're wanting something more than just that infantile thing to hold on to, you realize there's nothing for you there.
Right.
And so you start looking for it elsewhere.
How long ago did you become Orthodox, Icon Corner?
I am actually a catechumen right now, to be received this summer.
Excellent. Well, glory to God. So you're then the perfect person to ask. While I assume then right before that, you were still a pastor in the Church of Christ?
Yes.
So were you guys having conversations about the fact that so many of the younger generation is leaving the Protestant church? I mean, what were some of those conversations happening?
I mean, the Churches of Christ are a little bit unique in that their doctrines are generally congregation specific, but very unshakable on what they believe. So if you don't believe what we believe, you're out. Just go ahead and leave. Go on the street to the Baptist church. You're out.
Okay.
But they were very much trying to figure out, how do we bring youth in and how do we keep our youth? And that question comes up more, in my opinion, than what truly is pleasing to God is how do we keep our youth?
Well, what was the major catalyst that took you from a position of authority in the Church of Christ to a catechumen in the Orthodox Church?
That's a long story, but I'll start. A buddy of mine was Orthodox, and since you've had a little bit of experience with Churches of Christ, you know that the whole thing is proving everyone else wrong because we're right.
Right.
And so I met my buddy David, and he was telling me about Orthodoxy, and I'd heard about it. I was like, well, they don't use instruments either, so they're kind of like us, but then I've never really researched them. So I started doing some research, and I was like, oh, they're Catholic light. They're wearing robes, and they got incense. Like, this will take 5 minutes, man. Give me 5 minutes, and I'll call you back, and I will debunk Orthodoxy. And so I started studying it, and I was going, let me read. I was like, I'm going to disprove him. I am going to read the church fathers, because clearly we're the first century church. And so I'm going to start with this St. Clement of Rome fella, because he's in the Bible. So he's a first century Christian, clearly us. And then like the first page, Eucharist, jumps right off the screen. And I go, that's a little early. It's a little earlier than I expected. We're talking first century. And so I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe Clement lost his mind. I'm going to start with this Polycarp fella. Never heard of him either. And so I started reading St. Polycarp, and I'm going, I'm in big trouble. So I just went from church father to church father. And my wife was like, what are you reading? And I said, I can't even explain it right now. Just let me figure it out first. And then I'll explain it once I know what I'm talking about. And the more I read, the more I was going, we're not here.
Right.
These people are all saying what my friend David is saying. They're not saying what I'm saying. Right. And the more that I read, the more that I did not find us. And I got all the way into the 300s, and I said, okay, this is problematic. This is extraordinarily problematic. If we're the first century church, why don't we exist?
Right.
And so I called a buddy of mine who was a Baptist preacher, and I said, hey man, you ever read the church fathers? And he just started laughing on the other end of the phone. And I said, what's funny? And he goes, man, you're not going to find us there. I said, what do you mean you're not going to find us there? Did you know about this? And he was like, yeah, I've read them. I had to read them in seminary. He goes, y'all didn't read them in seminary? And I was like, no, we just read the Bible. Like they didn't give us these books. And he was like, well, hold on to your faith because it's about to get rocked.
And he was still a Baptist pastor?
Yeah. And I will tell you this, something you said earlier. If there was a lateral way that preachers and churches of Christ could become priests in Orthodoxy, I would say, I'm not going to say half, a large portion of Church of Christ preachers would leave and become priests in Orthodoxy next week.
Wow. Well, hopefully they do that. I mean, once they convert, once they enter the church, there's nothing stopping them from going to seminary.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that terrified me, because I looked around and I was like, what am I going to do for the next 3 years? Because I talked to a priest. He said it's normally like 3 years after you convert, and I'm going, man, I've been a preacher for pretty much most of my adult life. Like, what am I going to do for the next X amount of years? Right. And and when I left, I was like, okay, I have to figure out what is happening, because I have this much money and this much time, and bills are due next week. Like, what do I do now?
If it's any consolation, the Lutheran minister friend I mentioned before, he was in his 50s, and he actually even took up manual labor, like working bricklaying. Like, you got to do what you got to do, because the fact is, as you mentioned, even while it is true, like ironically, but the Baptist guy, I knew a lot of Bob Jones Baptist ministers, and every single one of them admitted to me that, to my face, they were like, yeah, no, we're not there in the first century. And I know several guys who went to Bob Jones who are now Orthodox, but it's what do you call it? The fact is, like, the burden of being an actual priest is very, very different than being a pastor. And just having seen what my spiritual father goes through, comparing it to what my dad's own roles as a, the ministry stuff he does, it's a night and day difference. And frankly, the reality is, maybe there's one exception, but fact is, for practically all those guys, the priesthood would murder their soul if they were to jump straight into it like that. And that's the thing. That's the part of where learning humility comes into play. Like, one actually has to be the student. Like, a catechumen is a student, and then even after that, there's a time where one is a neophyte, one is a baby, one is still consuming milk. It takes time to grow, and to where the point where you can actually, serve even just as a reader. It takes time, and that's just the reality.
For sure. And one thing in the churches of Christ that's a little bit unique is the belief in the spiritual world. I'm trying to figure out the best way to say it. They believe in the spiritual world, but in terms of like the spiritual warfare, they don't really believe it. If that makes sense? Like, they believe in the concept of it, but not actually believe it. And so, man, the things that happen when you decide to convert is something you really cannot explain to someone until they're going through it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The spiritual warfare that you go through.
May I throw two things in to try to go back to the original topic? Yeah. So one of them was a comment that was made in this conversation about like the influence of Protestantism and like how it easily segues into secularism. Yeah. Like, for example, like my go-to for an example would be Hegel. Like, I think his philosophy is one that kind of bypasses this whole Gnostic question of like, well, are Protestants really only up there in the clouds and the metaphysics and they're just nominalists, or are they really materialists pretending to be spiritual, right? And I think the real contender for Orthodox people is what I see as this like neo-Hegelian like materialism. I call it materialism not because it believes in matter primarily, but because it has a very similar gnosiology, or rather way in which it goes both ways. Rather, it believes that both matter informs the spirit and spirit informs matter. However, symbolically, it might sound absurd. Like, because if you think about it, like, your material constraints also affect the way you think. And like, even like neo-Marxist thinkers like Pierre Bourdieu make very good points when they point to, for example, the concept of habitus, which is basically, okay, depending on where you're born, the people you meet, like the types of jobs you have, how much money you have, your tastes, your gender, whatever, you're going to have a certain worldview because you're basically shaped into that. And what I'm trying to say with all of this is, I think that the real contender for this space is not merely other like religions like Protestantism, but rather let's say a buffed up secularism which promises like the kingdom of heaven on earth. And I think this Hegelianism is like kind of the or neo-Hegelianism would be like the best candidate to kind of encapsulate this idea of dialectically we're gonna construct like the correct spiritual framework because we're all aiming towards truth. What would be your rebuttal to that, besides just like maybe restating the Orthodox gnoseology of like you need divine inspiration to act properly?
In the meantime, let us grift for super chats.
Well, Jose, what are your thoughts on where America is going to be in 50 years?
I don't see the state as it currently exists, the federal state existing it won't make its 300th birthday. I mean, that's my.
You don't think it will?
That's my personal prediction. Well, that's been my prediction since I was like 14 years old. But so, and I've yet to see anything that's changed my mind on it. And mainly, I was just looking at demographic data again, like family formation, fatherlessness, etc. You cannot have a functioning state in a fatherless society. It's once the American elite pushed no-fault divorce, they essentially threw away their empire. And frankly, it's very rare. It is exceedingly rare for empires to make it past the 300-year mark. So you have Rome, for example, and it was, the Republic collapsed into an empire, and then that empire was saved by Christianity, which then persisted. You have Tsarist Russia, which persisted for 900 years. Then you have China and also Japan, which, China is impressive in terms of their durability as a society. Yeah. And it's funny because I was talking to my dad about some stuff with Taoism, how it was practiced, 4,000 years ago. And my dad was talking about, because he was his field of study was ancient Near East, so ancient Egypt, ancient Israel, Arabs, the Sumerians, all that fun jazz. But he said, it's fascinating how like ancient Chinese religious practice, it has a lot of things that are that parallel the Hebraic religion that existed, 3,000 years ago. So that's the thing. Fundamentally, a society that is the more truth oriented a society is, its ability to endure will last. Once a society is wholly based on sand, it's already set a timer in terms of how long it will last till inevitable collapse. Right. And we're very much in that stage of collapse. It's a very simple metric, like essentially the very baseline for that to turn around, for that to not to happen. Essentially, divorce rates have to go sub 5%. And marriage and family formation. My generation of women, the women of my generation, half of them will not have any children. Yeah. So that has to essentially 80% of the women have to have children within wedlock, and with a divorce rate of less than 5%. And that would be the seed which could turn around the empire. And I'm speaking just from a demographic, political, like long-term political view, not Democrat versus Republican, but like actual statecraft of how do you run a state? How does a state function? Where does its source of power actually come from? How do you build solid industry, solid demographics, which you can, draw on for manpower, solid food and energy sources, etc. And that simply isn't happening right now. So it's like, definitely like, hey, if Trump gives you a reprieve, awesome. Just take what you can get. I would not recommend wasting one's energy serving an empire who's already signed on its own destruction. Rather use your energy to building your own little locality. And that's the thing. This is even the nature of like within the Orthodox Church. Like you join Orthodoxy, great. And then you get people who are like, I'm going to save the Orthodox Church. And it's like, no, how about you focus on being, obviously a good catechumen first, and then a good layman, and right. As a good layman, focus on building a strong parish. That's something you can actually do. Right. Build a strong marriage. That's something you can actually strive toward. Be a good father. That's something you can actually strive toward as well. And then eventually be a good grandfather. Set up your kids so that they can have strong, stable, strong marriages. Right. That you can do. That's what will turn it around in the long run. But the U.S. is going to go through a collapse. And here's the thing: I would not mind, my grandson, if my grandson gets to live through the collapse of the federal government. How is that a bad thing? His taxes will crash. Like it's the amount of restrictions. Like you'll be able to build reliable cars again. A lot of the stuff, you'll be able to build reliable houses. The houses that are mandated today with the building codes and everything, and the financialization of the system, the houses being built are utter trash. So nothing is being built to last anymore. So it's like there's nothing but upset I see from the collapse of the imperial structure itself. Like if orthodoxy explodes like crazy and things can be turned around and actually be turned around, like from strong families forming, etc., awesome. I don't expect that to happen in that kind of way. I'm not planning on that to happen. My own plan is focus on, my wife, my children, my grandchildren, build something strong locally that will endure the times that are coming.
Right. I think that's what we all should be focused on, really.
Okay. May I push back, Jose? So
sure.
I completely agree with the sentiment. What I do think will happen is that it's not so much as the empire collapsing from within. I think that the moment that the U.S. starts to show weakness geopolitically, I think that its competitors will definitely pounce. And the question would be, like, what is actually happening demographically that would allow that? Like, how do you see the collapse in the West occurring faster than what's happening in China and
Hands
maybe
down,
India
yeah.
and those kinds of places?
Well, not India. India's a different story. I expect India to collapse. The fact is, if you look at the history of India, it's only ever been held together when it was either ruled by the British or ruled by Muslims, like the Mughals.
Yeah, I was going to say the Mughal Empire.
You only have one Vedic empire that united the whole subcontinent, and that's the Mauryan Empire, which was their version of Rome, and it did not even.
And it was Indo-European.
Yeah, and it didn't even make it 200 years. Like, it collapsed. It's Hinduism. Like, if you want to talk about division, like, yes, Protestantism breeds division. Hinduism, even though it's the ecumenism of everything, worship all the demons. There's nothing that divides like Hinduism.
Right.
I think Europe will be the canary in the coal mine. When we see London officially fall, when we start seeing Europe collapse, then we will know what's next, because we generally have, for the last few years, socially, we have been following them.
Right.
Well,
you say that.
How do you know?
We have a Brit in the chat that says,
over
here in the UK, we are in collapse right now. That's for
exactly.
Sure.
That's what I'm saying.
So what I'm asking you is, like, I'm in Spain right now. Like, how would you know if you've collapsed? Because London already has a Sikh mayor, right? Like, they're already a majority Muslim population. So when exactly we will not get a text message saying, "Hey, UK has collapsed. London is already fallen."
I know
for sure. Yes. We're not going to get like a mass message that London has fallen, like the TV show. But I think we'll be able to.
I was going to say,
yes, they have Muslim leaders, and yes, we have Muslim leaders. Look at New York. No, I don't think we're going to get a mass text message saying Europe has fallen to the Islamic invaders. But I think it will be. You'll start seeing a lot more Somali-esque characteristics of Europe once that starts happening. I mean, look what happened to Somalia after Islam took over. It completely collapsed. It's just basically piracy. There's nothing being invented there. There's nothing being made there. There's nothing great happening in that society. I think when you see Europe completely collapsing, that's when you'll know we're next.
Yeah. What I was going to say, Ivan, like, if you're in terms of political collapse, what you're looking for, it's not going to be like, oh, the federal government's now gone. It's more like kind of like what happened with the Western Roman Empire. It's the moment when people no longer look to the federal government for any kind of authority, like kind of like what happened with South Africa right now. If you want justice, no one goes to the South African government. No one goes to the police. They take care of it themselves. When that's happening, like in the United States, that's what's going to happen in the next 50 years. And there are places in the US where this actually has begun to happen, where people no longer, like, if there's a dispute, you don't go to the courts. You're taking it to your local don. Like, there are Tejanos who do that. There are what do you call it? It's the same thing. Like, if someone does something to one of your children, you and your neighbors and your community takes care of it. Like, people are no longer going to the standard, system of power to resolve disputes, for enforcement against crime, for what do you call it? Yeah, for direction in general. Essentially, you're at a point where the government passes laws, like South African government passes, or Johannesburg passes these crazy gun control laws. Everybody ignores it, and frankly, South Africa is de facto the freest gun nation in the entire world, because the government cannot project power at all, and that's the key element. When people start essentially completely ignoring and no longer looking to the federal government for anything. And two, the federal government's utterly incapable of enforcing anything within its own borders. So its capacity for enforcement even now is decreasing. And that's just going to keep decreasing. I mean, even like, I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. So I actually had to write 2 articles in my first 2 articles writing about any of the Supreme Court justices. They're actually both praising Justice Jackson, the black woman who speaks much. And the reason is because, so it's hilarious, because one of them there was a case 2 years ago concerning bribery, where Kavanaugh used a very complex legal argument to argue that bribery is not in fact bribery, so it's totally legal, and it's a tip. It counts as gratuity, which means under the Trump tax code, bribes to congressmen and politicians and also bureaucrats are not taxable. They don't pay income taxes. So what was hilarious was Justice Jackson, being somewhat the most mentally impaired person on the court, couldn't understand Kavanaugh's arguments, and so she actually not only voted against it, against the whole bribery is not bribery. She wrote a dissent, and it's hilarious reading it, because she literally doesn't understand why they're just, what do you call it? Anyway, it's just the benefit of retardery, but also the benefit of DEI. Like, the fact is, DEI, the whole push by Dewey to make the American population, innumerate and illiterate. Only 13% of the population can actually read an adult novel and understand and comprehend what's happening in the story. That's the population has been so dumbed down. True. They can't hire the help to actually do stuff anymore, and that's Jackson is very clear about that. There was a recent case, a gun case, this past June. I think it was June 24, June 26, I forget. But yeah, anyway, the point is, Jackson wrote the dissent, which was against the ruling that was in favor of or against gun control. And in her dissent, she stated that essentially the majority is correct in their interpretation of the Bruin methodology for determining gun stuff. So in her dissent, she affirms what the majority opinion, and essentially gives a whole detailed, a granted, low IQ version argument in favor of the majority opinion in the supposed dissent. And that's going to be cited in future court cases. And I really look forward to that being cited, because whenever some, liberal anti-gunner is going at it, all you got to do is cite the dissenter, Justice Jackson, who affirms that gun control or restrictions on carrying by their nature are automatically assumed to be unconstitutional. So it's just because she's an idiot, and not just her, she's not the one doing most of the work. All the people underneath her are all DEI hires. They're all low IQ. And so they can't lie. Like, the problem is this: their capacity to lie is drastically, to make lies that are believable, it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And they have a habit of speaking like children. If you've met anyone, even adult with Down syndrome or etc., like, they will say the most they'll say the truth at the most inopportune moments, and it's hilarious. And Justice Jackson does that just because she's that low IQ, and so is all of her staff, and they write like it too, which is why, I'm really hoping that Clarence Thomas gets his court. He's been begging for a court case where he can throw out the cases that banned the states from banning birth control and homosexual marriage, because I just want to read Justice Jackson's dissent, because it's just there's so many admissions that are made because she's retarded. And that's the thing. That's the thing about the American empire. It's losing it. The elite are losing their ability to project force to get what they want, because they've dumbed down the help they need in order to project their will. That's what's actively happening right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with the case of the U.S., but simply because of the gun issue, in the sense that the U.S. has decentralized power in such a manner that if a state decides to enforce a differential gun control, then what you will get is probably like a parastate operating. Whereas here in Europe, people, since they don't have guns, the state still has, no matter how incompetent, still has the monopoly on force. Even if you see like women policemen get beat up by Muslims on the regular. Why? Because regular Joe is never going to stand up to organized police, right? And there won't be any drug lords or mob bosses that will compete with the state. So I think that is I would say not a good thing, but a neutral thing that makes things in Europe very different than in the US. In Europe, the political system, even though it's crummy, it's still, in a sense, a functional democracy. I don't like democracy, for everyone who knows me and has talked to me before, but it's still a functional democracy because you actually need like a Muslim politician to gain control of the levers of the state. You cannot sidestep the monopoly on force that states currently have. Whereas in the US, if you can somehow bypass the state or buy like the state's protection, you can definitely change the structure. And that makes the US, let's say, politically more fragile, unless you get unless you get a Democrat politician to try to remove weapons like wholesale from the US population.
Well, that would probably be the quick collapse. That would be the quick.
Yeah, that would be a very quick collapse.
I mean, that would be the quick version right there.
The federal government will lose all legitimacy if that were to happen. Because even like, for example, like I live in a very poor, relatively poor area. Like the median household income here is 37.
Get off. I appreciate you, David.
Hey, God bless you, brother. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Hey, God bless you and your family.
Thank you.
Like the median household income, like for a family, is like $37,000 where I live. And there are many, many families where the only way they're getting through what's currently happening with the amount of inflation that's kicked in since COVID, frankly, has been hunting. And so when you get to the point where if the federal government were to actually, like, you have a genuine Democrat get in power, and he's like, I'm going to take away the ability for you to feed your children, that will, like, that the level of noncompliance will lead to not complying with a whole lot of other federal laws, including laws like, oh, I have to have certain things in my car that make the car less reliable. Like, okay, I'm going to start removing things from my car that I don't want. That's the thing. Like that's, and you're correct. Unfortunately, you know, I know there is some hunting in Spain, but like I've seen the process of like the licensing. It's crazy. But like, you know, it's what do you call it? The thing you want to look out for in your case is at what point do you have what point do black market weapons start becoming a thing? But also the question is, when does it become a thing where it's just accepted as normal? That's a sign you want to look out for.
I mean, your point is great. However, I do think that we already have weapons in the sense that, okay, we don't have guns, but anybody can buy a hammer. Anybody can buy knives from Amazon. Like only in certain nations, like, do those things get banned, and they cannot be. It's like a hammer. Who will ban a hammer? And that's a deadly weapon. So it's like, it's not that we're just not going to have showy fights. We're going to have bloody fights. Like we're going to have the nationalists club to death Muslims and vice versa, which is already happening on a low level. But now there's going to be like an actual, like, let's say, we're going to start to see more of a formal civil conflict as the years go by. That's what I predict.
Yeah, and in the case of Spain in particular, the other thing you want to look out for is assassinations. Two different kinds you're looking for. So one at the governmental, like Madrid level, like those who are actually running the nation, where you have the various oligarchic factions actually going after each other's children. I mean, you can see that in Colombia in its history with its civil wars. That always proceeds. And then the other thing you want to look out for too, if you live in a locality, if you live in rural Spain or somewhere where, let's just say, someone working for the central government disappears and no one comments. Like, when does that start happening? That's another thing to look at. That's a very common thing that happened in Mexico. Like, you know, they had these atheist Bolsheviks ruling Mexico who would send out public school teachers in order to educate the children, to take them out of Catholic schools and to educate them into atheism. And the public school teachers would disappear, and no one, and they would send investigators, some of whom also would disappear, and no one spoke. So it's as much as, like, you know, what do you call it? I'm not Mexican, but I do admire, like, the Cristeros and a lot of the ways that many of the, especially in El Norte, that a lot of people resisted the satanic Mexican government. So that's the thing. Like, at what point does that start happening in Spain? That's things to look out for. I mean, Mexico's already a failed state. It's those things preceded Mexico getting to where it is now.
Yeah.
You know, one thing back on the main topic there, Protestantism can't save America. it was Protestantism that kind of created this system where, Jesus's prayer, by your unity and your love, all men will know you're my disciples, right? Well, when there's nothing but division and, well, I'll leave this church and go to that church, and this church go to that church. Well, this church believes this and that church believes that, and there's 38,000 of them, and pick whichever one you want. When someone looks at that and is trying to become a follower of Christ, just from American, just a base American standpoint, you've been raised as an atheist, and you look at that chaos, most of them just go, what's the point? Like, how do I know it's Methodist? How do I know it's Baptist? How do I know it's Church of Christ? How do I know it's Roman Catholic? There's so many options. If this was unified the way Jesus said it is, then that's maybe it would be that. But if it's so crazy and divided, but you go back 500 years, that doesn't exist. Isn't that insane?
Right. Yeah.
500 years ago, none of them existed.
Right. That's just 2 Americas away.
That's 2 Americas, and none of them were a lot. None of them existed. Not a one of them. That's mind-boggling to think about.
Right. Hey, my guy, I know you've been waiting. Are you Protestant or are you Orthodox, or what are your thoughts on the topic? You hear me?
Yeah, you can hear me.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't really know what I am, actually. I'm kind of in like no man's land a little bit. I probably lean more towards the Orthodoxy side recently, but it's very recent. And
Okay.
so I guess technically I come from like a Catholic background, but only culturally, in the sense that my area was dominated pretty much by Catholicism. But yeah, I never completed the what do they call it? The confirmation. It's like their catechumen process. You go through all these, first communion, all that kind of stuff. And confirmation is like the final step. And yeah, I bailed right at the confirmation. I was like, yeah, I'm not, I'm not with this. But not so much out of any kind of theological disputes or any kind of knowledge-based whatever. It's more out of I guess personal, existential, experiential issues, and my childhood type of thing that led me to I don't know how to explain this properly. Make certain assumptions about like who God is and whatever else that just tends to have a very corrupting type of force behind it, like so like to speak more specifically, like a very, I'm sure y'all have all heard this before, a very common criticism of like who God is, right? Is like, like I can't follow a God who's willing to, allow so much evil in the world or whatever, right? Like that's like the problem of evil. It's a very common
theodicy.
Issue that people have. And I would love to say that I wasn't, subject to the same issue myself, but it'd be a lie. It's actually funny, until actually very recently, I came to more of the understanding that I can kind of attribute this to Jay Dyer. I watch a lot of his stuff. Is the concept of first cause and second cause. I think that's a really good insight into like this type of thing, right? So it's like God doesn't make us do evil things. We choose to do evil things, right? So, and if you take that out of it, then you negate the idea of free will and all kind of it gets super fucking messy, right?
Yeah.
Like theologically. And so, yeah, that was kind of like the root of all that for me. So I guess I'm just like rediscovering all this type of stuff, and it's pretty wild, the whole orthodoxy thing. It's very
well. Keep going, man.
crazy.
I know that it's kind of a new thing. Yeah, if you've been diving into Dyer stuff, I know a lot of us listen to Dyer talking about theology and debates and stuff like that to try to give us a new framework to even understand what orthodoxy is. And
it's so
a journey, man.
It's
a journey.
I really do like the more philosophical side of it, right? I mean, which is Dyer's, that's kind of his shtick, like his main thing is not of course not only theological, but very heavy on the philosophical side, like the worldview and the coherency of it and all kind of stuff. And it's just like, man, it's like if you're gonna be even slightly intellectually honest, and like it's it's like impossible to argue with, you know what I mean? It's so, like, the more you learn about it, the more coherent it gets. And it's like,
Yeah.
man, like you would have to be just so enveloped with pride to such an like impressive degree. I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know that was the case for me. Orthodoxy became overwhelmingly true the more I read about it, and I was doing it in a PhD course as a psychedelic New Ager, spiritual but not religious. And the more you learn, the more you read the church fathers, the more you learn about history and the Byzantium. You're like, wow, it's amazing.
Yeah, I need to start getting into that
this way.
side of it. Right.
Huh?
I need to start getting into that side of it. The more like the reading part of it, I haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay.
Although,
well,
I mean, I hear y'all talk about it a lot, and it's like,
Yeah.
man, I need to like, you know,
well, take your
I need to
time,
read
man.
about it more.
It's a journey, but you know, glory to God, man. It's great to hear. At least it sounds like you're seeing the world through a similar perspective that all of us on here are seeing the same thing. So, just
Yeah,
keep on
to a
keeping on,
point.
man.
To
Yeah.
a point. I mean, a lot of it's still somewhat murky. I mean, I'm probably the most ignorant person here on all these topics, but
It's a journey,
you know,
bro. You're
yeah,
you're new
it's a
to
lot.
it. We're all new to it at one point. So everybody starts at a different place, but you're in the right place.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. But I mean, you know, even with all that, I don't know. It's because I mean, I've been wrong on most things in my life, but not everything, right? And some things are. It's good to like have a bit of like, man, I always had a feeling like, God, it was something to this, you know. Like, you know, to kind of give an example, this is kind of, I guess, a bit more philosophical, but like, I've always had the kind of an assumption, I guess, that like thoughts, right? Like, I've never thought that thoughts necessarily come from us exclusively, right?
Correct.
It's like our
Correct.
brain is like
A receiver.
a receiver, right? I mean, it's almost like similar in a sense, to make like a weird analogy, to like the radio in like your car, right?
Yep.
It's like your brain is like the antenna, and the dial on the radio is like how loud it gets, and the station is like which thoughts you choose to listen to. But the song itself, right, it doesn't originate from the radio. The radio
Right.
just transmutes and translates it. And like
And
I've always
that's
kind of
for us
thought
spiritual
of it
warfare.
like that.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what
right.
that's for the Orthodox. That's why we have a different understanding of spiritual warfare and the imagination, the logismy, and where is the central focal point of spiritual warfare? Well, it's not just physical. It actually begins in, you know, the mind, where whatever, again, we call it the nous, our noetic faculties, but where is that? And it's not in space and time. And that's what the noetic, you know, the angels and the demons being noetic entities are. So
Right, exactly. And that's and like my specific frustration with that, because you know, you hear like certain more materialistic atheistic people, they'll argue that just because the brain translates, then that somehow means that the brain itself is the generative source mechanism for the thought itself. And I'm just like, no, dude, that's like you're putting the cart before the horse. Like that's not how it works. But you know, but like I've just heard that argument so much, and it's just like frustrating. It's like, dude, no, man, like what are you talking about? That makes no sense. Like the brain doesn't, because like you don't think thoughts. Thoughts occur and then you participate in them. Because to think, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong in this, but this is just my understanding of it. You don't think thoughts. If you think thoughts, then you're thinking about thinking thoughts, and you get into this weird regressive loop where you're thinking about thoughts.
Right.
But you're not. It's not the same as like actually. Like, you get what I'm trying to say? Like, I'm sorry if it's a little weird, but
no, I
yeah,
get it.
It's like it has to start from outside of you, comes to you, and then it flows through you. Like you participate in it. You're not the source.
Right.
And
well,
we
got
to how to get that to like people to understand that. It's
we got a couple people that are wanting to join, but we are let me catch up real quick on the super chats. Pierre says, what caused the schism exactly? Well, it's a few factors. I'll give you the 1-minute version. The schism really began with political tensions between East and West. I like to point to the year 800 on Christmas, when the Pope essentially elevated Charlemagne to the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. And from there was a cultural and theological divergence. You know, Charlemagne insisted upon the filioque. So there's theological factors, there's the supremacy of the Pope, and all these different ecclesiological factors and theological factors, even who is going to convert the Slavs, all this different stuff that led to a breaking away. But it is a deep and important historical issue that unfortunately would be a whole stream or multiple streams in and of itself. But Pierre, thank you very much. Cody Mills says, Sola Scriptura will always lead to moral relativism. True. Whatever victories conservative Protestants make will be wiped out by their foundations. That is true. Nathaniel throws in 10, says, I'm not optimistic enough for a political solution, but I'm not crazy enough for a violent solution. Fair enough. The only thing that I can save the U.S. is Holy Orthodoxy. Glory to God for that. And Ismael Garcia, Ismael Garcia throws in 5, says, great stream. Much love, DPH. Well, thank you very much, brother. And he followed up with another $5 super chat. So thank you very much for that. And XX Lockstep, major thank you to him and Nathaniel for helping me reach the super chat goal today. He says, thanks for the stream starting Return to Babylon in the next few days. Can't wait. Well, glory to God, man. Thank you very much for the support by purchasing my book. And if you guys haven't, it is the best Christian deconstruction of transhumanism, I can promise you. Nathaniel throws in 5, says, here's my extra codal tithe. God bless. Well, Nathaniel and XX Lockstep, thank you guys so much for the support tonight. Really appreciate you guys. And X Lockstep said, for the goal, which we hit the goal, thanks to you guys. Nathaniel also threw in another 5. Lockstep threw in another 5. And Lockstep said, I'm curious how they logically turn the cops retarded in the UK. It's actually impressive from a Bond villain point of view. Yeah, I saw the chat was talking a little bit about the effeminacy and the gayness of some of the policing going on in the UK, and fair enough for that. Cody Mills, thank you so much, brother. He says, God bless you and your family, brother. Well, God bless you as well and your family, Cody. God bless you, man. And Joshua Tree throws in 2, says, what are your thoughts on the SSPX excommunication? In a very short response, my idea is that I think this would a lot of potential converts to Holy Orthodoxy. So it's unfortunate. I saw a couple of the SSPX people online lamenting that this is devastating to them in many ways, being excommunicated from the Roman Catholic Church. But I think it's providence for them to be ingratiated into Holy Orthodoxy through it and actually return home. So hopefully that's what will happen. Now we have Tio Adrian and Hostile Hyperborean. What's going on, guys? What are your thoughts on the topic tonight?
Well, I mean, Protestant can't save America. That's obvious, okay, to anybody who bothers to look. The question is, what can and how can it? And that saving of America or anywhere else won't be achieved until, rather like happened with iconoclasm, like that schism being ended, and with repentance to the iconoclast, with the ending of the schism, for want of a better word, between true Orthodoxy and world Orthodoxy.
Oh, are you true Orthodox?
I am true Orthodox.
Oh, man.
And
you guys are so belligerent. You guys are so unbecoming.
Well, no. I mean, look, we were the guys who'd been persecuted for 110 years.
You guys chose to break away from the church.
No, we didn't. We were persecuted in Romania. We were persecuted in Greece. We were persecuted all over the place. We didn't break away from anything. They literally beat our people up. They literally martyred people like St. Catherine of Mandra. And we have, despite that, survived. And it is a parallel with iconoclasm, which lasted over 100 years. Now, we have, for example, we just have one calendar. We don't have any of this confusion about that. But that's a relatively minor issue. It's ecumenism, it's co-worshipping with heterodox. That's the real problem. And it's happened all over the place. You see it, going back decades, like
right.
Siena 1986. You see these world Orthodox hierarchs. It's all out there. Nobody can deny it.
But we had bad
co-worshipping with the papists and with everyone else.
Adrian, I don't disagree with the problem of ecumenism, but we've had bad bishops well before true orthodoxy. The church is filled with
there's always
hierarchs.
bad. I mean, the fallen world always had that, but the question is where is the true church? I mean, as one hieromartyr said, the church is without fault, without wrinkle, okay, as an organism, but the church as an organization, that's quite another matter, because it's made up of fallen human beings on this earth.
Agreed.
So the point is where is that church, and how to resolve these issues? Because if America and everywhere else is going to be converted, and I believe it will, but most likely, I'm afraid, after the World War, and you've done some excellent work on
I agree with that. I think after World War III is when orthodoxy will really catalyze.
I mean, sadly, there's very, very unlikely, always possible to God, but it's very, very unlikely to be the kind of conversion on a mass scale that would in America or anywhere else before that war that would avoid it, because and not only that, but that as the blood of the martyrs is seed, we have this biggest martyrdom yet, which is what happened with Russia with the Bolsheviks, and is still in largely more subtle forms, but still going on, mainly against the true Orthodox in Russia.
Well, my hope with, for example, are you familiar with Bishop Maximus in Central America? He's an old calendar.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful one. I've spoken with many clergy who know him and his family personally.
I don't know him personally.
Okay, well, I've even spoke with Father
you are. We're all divided,
and
that's part of the problem as well.
Yes, and that's what I was going to get at. Is I've spoke with a handful of Serbian and Russian priests one night, specifically about some of the old calendarists and the schisms that occur in the Orthodox world. And they feel optimistic that there's going to be a day in the future in which there'll be some type of reconciliation through ROCOR, God willing. But we'll see. And
well, ROCOR is, split,
Yes.
I mean, look, I've been persecuted by Kalinikites. They threw us out of our parish. Myself and Vladimir Moss, who undoubtedly will have heard of, and so there's plenty of splits and vicious splits within true Orthodoxy as well. At the same time, we have channels like NFTU, which is trying to get more unity. So what you've got a kind of constant situation in which there's some splits, and then there's some negotiations, reconciliations, and
I think
and that's been going on for.
Well, we're not going to be able to solve our disagreements tonight because,
but that's
obviously I'm in a difference of opinion, and I think the majority of us in here. But
that's also the case in World Orthodoxy.
Yeah,
but if we're going to convert,
right? But that's not the. I mean, the topic today was Protestantism, and that's what. That's my thing with the true Orthodox. Every time I interact with them, it goes back to these internal conflicts on Orthodoxy, and it's hard to even have conversations about other topics.
Look, I've already said at the beginning, Protestant can't save it. Protestant can't save America. So the next question is, we as Orthodox in the broad sense of the word, what are we going to do to try and get America saved? And one thing we have to do is to sit down rationally and resolve these differences. I think the calendar thing can be resolved because most of world Orthodoxy, for that matter, is still on the old calendar. So just the rest of them come on over. That deals with one thing. Then there's the issue of co-worshipping.
All right.
That can be resolved as well, I think.
Yeah. I don't want to hash out this conversation.
The main
Adrian,
differences,
Adrian,
and then we have something to sell
stop
to
now.
America and everywhere else.
Chill, bro. You're speaking over me.
I'm well chill.
Okay,
and you're smiling too. So
no,
so
I'm not angry at you. I know everybody here is going to be
I said you're smiling.
I'm just
too.
saying this is not the place to hash out the. I'd be willing to host an open panel in the future if we want to get into the calendar issues and some of the schisms. But today was specifically about many of the ailings of the West, particularly Protestantism or Western Christianity in general.
We have what an Irish
hold on.
A heated agreement.
Hold on. Yeah, we're in agreement there. Hostile Hyperborean, are you there? Hostile Hyperborean. Okay.
Hey, before we go to the next thing, I was going to let you guys know I need to jump off of here.
That feel free. I think we're getting ready to wrap up. I told Jose it was going to be 2 hours. We're hitting the 3-hour mark. So,
anyway,
appreciate you guys for having me on.
Greetings from Portugal. We're with you.
Oh,
I'm
from
half
Portugal.
British,
Didn't you guys just won
British,
a
half
World
Canadian?
Cup
So I
tonight.
have an interest in North America, to put it mildly.
Okay. Well,
can I say a few things?
My sister was born in Pittsburgh, so there you go.
Well, I appreciate you guys for having me on. We'll have to do something together in the future for sure.
Absolutely. God bless you, Icon Corner. You're more than welcome anytime to come on when we're doing any of these open panels, brother. And just email me if you want to. Again, I don't know. Do you create content or something? Or
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, email me.
Icon Corner. Yep, for sure.
Email me at churchoftheeternallogos@gmail.com.
Sounds good. We'll do.
All right. God bless you and your family.
It'd be great if you could put the email in the chat so people can email if that's not going to.
I mean, it's just the YouTube channel name plus Gmail. It's easy to remember.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. Well, keep up the good work. You do lots of very interesting stuff.
Thank you, brother. I do appreciate that. You know, you've been even a little bit more agreeable than some of the other old calendarists I've met. They tend to be incredibly hostile. It's hard to have a conversation with them.
There's a parallel with the old believer schism. Okay. Well, okay, the old believers, they were badly treated initially, but some of them went way off into craziness and will never come back.
We've had a handful of old believer priests here in the U.S. that got into some very strange things.
And there's a parallel in Orthodoxy, true Orthodoxy, and the kind of liberal extremes of world Orthodoxy as well in that respect.
Yeah. All right, we're going to wrap up here. I'm going to give you all the just a couple minutes to say whatever you guys would like to say. I want to give a special thank you to Total Gravity, throws in a generous $20 super chat, and Vasi throws in 5, says, off topic, you ever coming to Australia? I would love to go to Australia sometime. So I'd be totally open to that. So I can't tell you it's on the schedule anytime soon. I'm going to have to save up some money for a big travel like that. But in the future, is that a bucket list? I'd love to go to Australia. Everybody I've talked to enjoyed Australia. So thank you, Vasi, for that.
I worked in Indiana when I was 19 one summer, by the way.
Oh, you're in Indiana. What city?
In Columbus. In Columbus.
Oh,
Indiana.
Columbus. Yeah, that's south.
I worked in
Cummins?
plastics factory there.
Oh, okay.
Only about
yeah. I know exactly. Actually, there's some parishioners from my church that live in Columbus.
It's real middle America there.
It is. It's very
with tractor pulls and things like that. You know,
that's what we do in our spare time.
And it's the kind of America that the rest of the world doesn't know about much. Really needs to.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. So, gentlemen, regarding the topic today, is there anything final you guys want to say before hopping off here? And then I'll save Jose as the last one here. But feel free if you guys want to say something, then we'll just step out one by one.
Yeah, I could say a few things. I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
I don't know how strictly it applies to the Protestantism thing. Maybe to a point. So I've always said that we're a victim of our own success, like in a large way, right? Like modernity in its entirety. Mostly because, I mean, people like we're creatures of necessity, right? Like it takes a special kind of person to do something before the point of where it becomes absolutely necessary to do something about it, right? With anything, like a lot of times it takes like a crisis of some sort to like get some people to like, you know, change their perspective or their habit or belief or whatever about, you know, anything. Of course, it's not always the case, but very commonly we just tend to kind of follow that track of behavior.
Right.
I don't know if that's explicitly a part of our human nature or not, but seems pretty common. So right now, you know, given the irony of the modern world is that life is so profoundly easy and comfortable that it breeds complacency and a bunch of other stuff, right? Because of the ease of everything, you know, which leads to laziness and whatever else. I mean, even with like the dropping of IQs and whatnot, a lot of that is rightly correlated with like the increase in dependency on technology and AI and all this stuff. It's because of the same type of principle, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like, it's like if you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like a lot of our cultural issues, like, well, downstream from the cultural kind of like I guess suppositions or foundations, it falls into that, this type of kind of, you know, malaise about whatever. One thing about America, though, you know, because I'm from America also, is that we have this rampant individualism. Like we're like belligerently individualistic, which pretty much like, you know, the logical entailment of that is that we have this massive issue with authority structures in general. Or so it seems, right? Because like you can't be like strongly individualistic and yet also be humbly subservient to an authority, because an authority implies something above yourself, right?
Right.
So it's like all this type of stuff gets wrapped up and like you just end up where we are, you know? I mean, even with the fact that like you have these thousands of sects that think that they can just, you know, reinvent the wheel for themselves, it's like that's a byproduct of that same type of thing.
Well, I think that's why the contemporary saints, regarding the Great World War, or again the collapse of the U.S., is that the U.S. has to be humbled so that they will accept orthodoxy, and it is going to come eventually. Right. And that's where you get to the pridefulness and the individualism, and, you know, I'm gonna, you know, the self-made man, the American dream, which there's nothing bad with, as I said, personal success, you know, making something of yourself. It's just that it is the default theology of America.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's one of our founding, like our like core foundational pillars of like being an American, you know, like our culture is like, it's rooted. It's like I mean, of course, like you need to be individualistic to a point, right? Because I have to live my life subjectively. So there's some so there's some individualism in that, but to make that like a pillar of like your entire worldview, it's like, it's kind of, it's excessive, right?
Right. All right.
Well, I appreciate. But the U.S. also has many strengths, right?
What is that noise?
Is it coming from me?
I don't know. It sounded like someone was hitting on a speaker or a microphone or something.
Can I just say this one tiny last little piece?
Yeah, go ahead, and then.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to like, you know, steal all the time here. About the like individualism itself, right? Like I've always noticed that like individuality in the way that I'm speaking of it, right? In like this excessive whatever, it's fundamentally based in a lie, because like to me, well, I'm sorry, not necessarily individualism, but independence, which people use them interchangeably, right? Independence itself to me is literally a concept or a word that literally has no meaning. Like it has no basis in reality whatsoever. Like there's no such thing as independence, right? Like, because to me, independence means to be separate from everything else in all of existence. Like that's essentially what independent means, like at its core. And it's like that's not even possible. Like you are created, you're a being, everything you use and interface with, to clothes, to technologies, to food, to the air you breathe, everything has been created already, and you did not create it for yourself. So how can you be independent from anything ever? And it's like, I feel like if more people were to understand that, then they would understand, like it would breed gratitude in the sense that like there's a large majority of our existence, we had no say in whatsoever. Like it was provided for us, right? Like the earth and the fact that, you know, we can grow food and we have air to breathe and sunlight, and our bodies protect us from illnesses, and like so much stuff. It's nonsense. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's all I want to say.
Agreed. Well, I appreciate you hopping on, brother, and do continue
Sorry, I hope I didn't.
No, you're all right. And
take up.
continue towards orthodoxy. I know that you're newly exposed to it, but take it as a journey and just keep moving forward, man. I promise things will
America historically has had much more religious freedom, for example, than Britain and Canada.
Yeah.
That's now under assault from, you know, especially I would say at a state level.
Mm-hmm.
And in subtle ways and not so subtle ways. I would say, interestingly enough, Portugal, which has a law on religious freedom, has far more religious freedom than America, but it's a relatively small society. But they really mean it, and you can perfectly well say here, I think homosexuality is sinful quite openly, even at the universities. Nobody's gonna do anything to you. You can hold put an encampment outside a university, and you know, calling for the freedom of Palestine and so on, and nobody's gonna do anything to you.
That's great.
And even the president of the country will come by and talk to you. I know, because I experienced that. So you know, there's different grades of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that we have to fight very strongly for is for that religious freedom in America and everywhere, as part of the process of showing that Protestant can't save America. But, you know, if we get a bit more united, we're never going to be totally united, but
Right.
Orthodoxy then can.
Amen. Well, God bless my guy and Adrian. Thank you guys for jumping on. God bless you both.
Well, thank you for having us. You know?
Wish you guys the absolute best.
Yeah,
And
appreciate it. Hope I didn't
keep up the
ramble too
good
much.
work and things on the fall of the Orthodox West and Orthodox England and all that suggested some of the streams.
Well, Adrian, I am going to give you credit. You're the nicest old calendarist, old believer that I've interacted with.
I'm not an old believer.
So God bless you guys.
If you like. I mean, we would tend to say patristic calendarist or whatever. But anyway, that's a rather technical point. But
okay,
you know, I know what you mean. Yeah.
But God bless you guys.
Yeah. Okay. Cheers.
Okay, so I wanted to make a small prediction. So I think there are two tendencies that we're going to see in the future. One is got to do with the masses. I think a lot of people will still remain Protestant, and there will be converts to Protestantism as well in the U.S. And this is because Protestantism is very intellectually accessible, not to say dumb. It's super easy if you want to like defend any sort of like essentialism, any sort of like metaphysical realism. Protestantism has got you covered with like smoke and mirrors. But the thing is, there's going to be a countercurrent, which is like the more intellectual kind of people, the ones that do want a deeper grounding in theology, will probably look outside Protestantism or go through Protestantism. So there will probably be a funnel into Orthodoxy from Protestantism. But at the same time, I think that like the impact of the masses will be great, and what will happen out of like the let's say intellectual drift into, let's say, the deeper theological philosophical conversations, I think that will not lead to like a flourishing of Orthodoxy just yet. It will lead to something very dangerous, because the moment that you're starting to discuss essentialism, you're going to inevitably start to discuss very dangerous political ideas, right? You're going to start talking about race. You're going to start talking about all these other things. And these are the conversations that will happen whether we want to or not. So I think it behooves Orthodox people to like try to preempt that drift, because you will see a lot of neo-pagans. In fact, one of the guys over here, I think I don't know. I'm presuming, but the hostile Hyperborean, I'm pretty sure he was going to be like a white nationalist.
That's what I would.
So,
I mean, yeah, hostile Hyperborean. I was assuming that as well.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see more of these kinds of people. From my perspective, at least, like the more the merrier. You know, like I like to have intellectual discussions with people who have differences of opinion.
Yeah, me too.
But I hope that these discussions eventually lead to some semblance of like a new intellectual state of the art for philosophy and from at least for metaphysics, because like theology does not develop, right? Like in the realist sense, like at least from the Orthodox perspective, like theology is not this like ever evolving and changing thing. It's something that is let's say experienced personally, right? Is the way you pray, etc. And like the fact that we're going to have to start discussing these things is going to be, I think, the test of whether like we will be able to, in the West, in the US, remain politically coherent. This is something that Peugeot, even though I disagree a lot with him, has been sounding the alarm on, which is people are not going to be like all going into Christianity. You will have a lot of neo-pagan stuff. And that's what I think is going to end up happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my thesis regarding modernity, is I think you're going to see more appeal to pre-modern religion. So orthodoxy, I don't even know about trad cath. Seems like the Vatican's on a war against them, but paganism for sure. I think that's why when you see right-wing politics, there's a large section that are pagan, you know, some type of neo-paganism, because whether they're conscious of it or not, they're trying to escape modernity. So yeah, I agree with you. But hey, Ivan, it was good to see you, man. God bless you. I wish you the absolute best. Hope things are going well. And next time we have an open panel, you know, do hop on.
Of course. Thank you. God bless both of you. See you guys.
God bless, brother. Jose.
Final take, as I always say.
Final take. And I also want to let everyone know to follow your Substack. You have one of the best Substacks. I've been reading his articles. He just had a great one I read this morning on liberalism, which kind of connected with a few things that you talked about with the Orthodox mirror and stuff like that. Guys, his link is in the video description. I'm going to share it in the chat as well. Go subscribe to Jose's Substack. I'm telling you, it's really good stuff. It's always enlightening. It's always interesting. If you like his hot takes here on, you know, these open panels, go read his more thorough thoughts that he writes down, and he posts articles multiple times a week. So I know I follow his Substack, and I highly encourage all of you guys as well. So Jose, final hot take. What you got?
Well, one, I appreciate Patrick pushing the grift for me, and two, what do you call it? As I always say, focus on your own backyard, your own locality. What do you call it? Like, take, for example, the case of the old calendar list. Like, no, none of us here are going to be the individuals who are going to solve bring the old calendar schismatics back into orthodoxy. But what you can do is you can build contribute to your own local parish, be an active member, do what you got to do, build a strong family that'll produce strong Orthodox Christians and more strong Orthodox families. That's where things actually happen. And even though Orthodoxy is but, 1% of the population essentially in the United States, even with that, if a small population like that produces, if enough people produce strong families, strong marriages, strong parishes, that will move the needle the direction of the entire American world. So, and I would phrase that, like David Wood recently was going into what's his name, Andrew Wilson, about the whole Russian world thing. The thing is, there's a Russian world and there's an American world, and there's a as the way I put it, even though like my part of Texas, like where I sit, it was civilized by Don Pedro Romero de Terreros, not exactly like Miles Standish up in Plymouth Rock, but America is a giant world unto itself, as many a European World Cup soccer fan has been discovering. Like, America is immensely diverse in history, heritage, and yes, it is more expansive than Western Europe, even though its age isn't as far back.
Right.
So there is, even was it Saint Severin Sarov? Acquire the grace of the Holy Spirit, and thousands around you will be saved. So hey, there you go. Now you know what you got to do to save your own little small town.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We got to think locally and not idealize globally or nationally and stuff like that. Just act locally. And before I forget, I want to give a special thank you to Paisios Disciple, who threw in $10 on Streamlabs and said, "Thank you for everything you do. God bless y'all, and pray for me and my family, brother." Well, we'll do. So thank you very much, Paisios. And J-Mel, whoever J-Mel is, God bless you. Thank you for the $15 super chat. He says, "We Christians are supposed to be spiritual in the world, not of it." Correct. He's Prots are, I think, Protestants are anchored in the material is what he was trying to say. Go back over there. We have the most wealth as proof. They're Gnostics and their faith is made up. Yeah, that was a very strange appeal to GDP as some type of validating quality for Protestantism. Hey, Jared, God bless you, brother.
Oh, hey. Yeah.
Hey, we're getting ready to wrap up the stream, but you're lucky I knew who you were. So I saw when you joined the stream, I pulled you up. We're getting ready to close up shop, but
okay.
It was good. I saw you in wait, and I was like, "Hey, how you been, man? You and the family doing all right?"
Yeah, we're doing good. Getting everything ready for potentially having a fourth kid.
Glory to God, brother.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I got baptized in December, so.
Glory to God, my man. That's wonderful. Yep. Are you having a boy or a girl?
Not sure yet. I think it's probably a girl, but I've got 2 boys and a girl right now, so.
That's great, man. Yeah. I'd love to catch up with you sometime, or, I don't know how your life is going or what's new, but I'd
so many things. So many things.
Well, right now we're getting ready to close up shop. We've been streaming for over 3 hours, but if you email me, or I can send you a link, maybe you can join one of our Logos Academy meetings sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to. I've been meaning to join up again. I just been busy with kids and writing and all that stuff, and becoming part of the Orthodox Church too. So it's been crazy, but it's been good.
Great, man. That's great, man. Well, it's good seeing you, man. I was actually thinking about you a couple weeks ago. I was thinking, I wonder what Jared's up to. So
it wouldn't have been when you were at Jim Bob's house, was it?
No, it wasn't when I was at Jim Bob's house. But hey, we're gonna hop off here. So I'm gonna pull you out. But hey, it was good seeing you, man. God bless you and the family. Legitimately.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Go subscribe to Jose's Substack. The link is in the video description. And I'm telling you guys, you will not be disappointed. It's great stuff. If you like Jose's mind, you like his takes, you'll love his Substack. Jose, thank you so much, brother, for hopping on and sharing your wisdom with everybody. And thank you so much for everyone out there who supported the stream tonight and support my work. I love you guys. Thank you so much. Myself and my wife are very appreciative. So thank you guys. And I'll be back either tomorrow or Saturday, and maybe both days. So I will see you guys in the next one. As always, until then, God bless.